morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first virtual Connecticut Economy Conference. First, I want to thank Marcum for sponsoring this event for a third year and for being a great collaborative partner in the execution and analysis of the 2020 Survey of Connecticut Businesses. I especially want to thank Michael Broder, who you'll hear from later in this event, to discuss the survey results, which have been really impressive. During such an extraordinary year for businesses of all sectors and sizes, we saw a record number of responses to our survey, which is really amazing. Nearly 1,000 business owners told us what their fears were during the early days of the pandemic. They told us what's still keeping them up at night 6 months into the public health crisis, and they also told us what's getting them up in the morning. In 2019, Connecticut was on the cusp of newfound growth. We had really started to turn a corner. We experienced our first 2 years of economic growth since the 2008 recession, which hit our state hard. We had only gained a net 3,600 jobs last year, but our GDP represented a quarter of New England's economy. But that all changed quickly, as many of you know. In April of this year, we lost more than 291,000 jobs, over 17% of our workforce, numbers that are just staggering and unfathomable. In the first quarter of 2020, the state's economy contracted nearly 5%. Connecticut saw a historic number of unemployment claims. We've lost over 4,400 lives to the virus. Employers and their employees alike were scared, unsure of how bad things were going to get and how they might worsen when the summer turned to fall. Businesses in the state and employees from Greenwich to Thompson looked for answers, advices, resources, and hope. CBIA heeded that call. Our staff worked overtime 24/7 to deliver all the businesses the latest information and guidance, which seemed to change every day. It was a very fluid and dynamic situation. We answered calls about employees testing positive for COVID-19, issues with securing critical PPP loan, and where to find personal protective equipment during the initial stages. I was one of those business leaders, just like many of you. I was one of the ones who looked to CBIA for years for incredible resources, knowledgeable staff, and invaluable services. None of the efforts would have been possible without the leadership and direction of my predecessor, Joe Brennan. I want to commend Joe for his tremendous leadership, his strength, his wisdom, his compassion, his patience during this extraordinary time, and congratulate him on his eventual retirement. I've been fortunate to do a virtual tour of Connecticut with Joe, to meeting many of our members, large and small businesses, and external stakeholders. And the support of CBIA in our state has never been stronger. Joe has been kind enough to stay on as senior advisor to our organization, and I look forward to learning from him and his 32 years of dedicated work for this state. And now, as leader of CBIA and our affiliation with Concept and Ready CT, which is tremendous, I want to continue that call for collaboration that Joe has built. What I hope you take away from this event, and what I hope to champion as the new president and CEO of CBIA and our affiliations, is how resilient and innovative businesses in Connecticut are. Manufacturers pivoted critical PPP and PPE. Large corporations made significant contributions to communities that needed support the most. Restaurants donated meals to laid off workers. The business community led the way, even though many operated with reduced staff hours and operations. Our businesses have undertaken incredible risks and expenses to ensure that frontline workers and their employees were protected. And businesses stepping up didn't just start when COVID hit. As a business leader, I know how much businesses do for our employees, their families, neighbors, communities in the state. From donating to local sports leagues, to playbill ads, to food banks, working soup kitchens, supporting chambers of commerce, building all things that create jobs and opportunities. I know firsthand how hard yet gratifying it is to run a business. I've been in your shoes. I know how much employers invest and care for their employees and communities. This is often forgotten when it comes time to make policies and tough decisions. It's why we at CBIA are committed to sharing your stories, getting the message out about how essential businesses are to the success of our state. We saw this during COVID when businesses literally kept our state going. And that's why we launched the Rebuilding Connecticut campaign. We've asked our elected officials, candidates for office, business leaders, and all residents of Connecticut to sign the Rebuilding Connecticut Pledge, which we've developed to inform and raise public awareness around the issues that are central to driving the state's recovery. We have an enormous opportunity ahead of us to rebuild our state, better and stronger than before. Nearly 95% of our economy is open, yet only 85% of our workforce is currently employed. The state is projected to endure a $3.5 billion budget deficit in the next 2 fiscal years. Many of our friends and family remain unemployed and are struggling. These challenges can only be addressed by successfully reshaping the relationship between the employers and government. We need a new way of thinking, a collaborative approach that focuses on promoting and driving growth. We saw this collaboration early in the stages of COVID, and it's what kept us going and put us in the position that we are now, a very positive and favorable one. Speaking of collaboration, I'd like to lastly thank Governor Lamont and his administration for their leadership and for lending us a seat at the table. Connecticut is in a better place now because of the collaboration of the private sector over the last 7 months. We still have a ways to go, but we hope to keep that dialogue and connection open as we navigate through this new season of the pandemic. We're honored to have one of those administrative officials join us today. I'd like to introduce the state's Chief Operating Officer, Commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services, Josh Cabal. Josh is a dear friend of CBIA. He served on our board for a very short time before the governor made a wise and great choice of bringing him over to his staff. And Josh is all things knowledgeable, not only about COVID, but how we're going to get out of this. And so Josh, take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Chris, for the invitation to be here with you. And congratulations to you as well, again, for taking on this challenge at CBIA. Such an important role, and thrilled that you are in it. And as you mentioned, certainly a really important seat at the table for everything we're working on here in Connecticut. I know the governor had a great time with you yesterday for that event, talking about the shared work program and how important that can be to helping many of our employers and their employees get through this difficult time financially. So, at Chris's request, I'm going to kind of quickly run through 3 topics, and then I think we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. But I thought it would be useful to, obviously provide a bit of a overview on where we are on COVID, both today and looking forward. I think that's clearly the kind of overarching story through which everything we're doing right now has to be considered. We'll talk about then the economy and how this our COVID response fits with the economy and what we're working on there, and then drill down further into what that means for state government as we look forward. So starting with COVID, I know everyone in this webinar surely has been following this very carefully, so I don't need to rehash a lot of the history. But with seven months into this now, amazingly, and with the benefit of kind of hindsight, I think it's evolved in a number of different phases. The first phase, I think it was like March and April, was kind of the survival phase, right? COVID was coming. We didn't know a lot about it. We didn't know how bad it could get. We were deeply concerned about whether the interventions we were taking were going to make enough of a difference to bend the curve and protect primarily our healthcare system, right? The key concern, as people remember back then, was overwhelming the healthcare system as a result of spread of COVID. But the good news was the interventions did work. We did bend the curve. And while we were still kind of plateauing in April, we shifted into the next phase, which was the reopen phase. And a lot of work that we'll talk about more went into, designing that. And through May and June, we took a number of actions and thoughtful steps that enabled us, as Chris mentioned, to get 95% of the state's economy able to be open, certainly operating in some businesses well below capacity, either by design or just based on customer demand. But that led us to a period of real good stability through the summer as we reopened smartly. But as we got to phase 3 in July, we saw a number of other states around the country blowing up with significant outbreaks, and decided to take a pause on phase 3, recognizing that the next phase to come was going to be critically important for us, which is, what we've just passed, which is kind of the reopening of our colleges and universities and our K through 12 education system, which has been occurring over the past month plus now. But with again, that now kind of about a month or so in the rearview mirror, and the metrics, although ticked up slightly, remain quite stable at very low levels. Later today in the press conference, the governor will be talking again about phase 3. So for those of you interested in that topic, I would definitely recommend tuning in at 4 o'clock for the governor's daily briefing today. And then looking forward, look, we know we're not out of the woods. We know we have to keep our guard up. But I think it's worth pointing out as well that I think we all believe that if there is another resurgence, that we are much better prepared than we were back in March and April. And I'll give you a few examples of why I feel that way. First of all, a lot of the challenges we had early on were related to commodity shortages, whether that was PPE or testing capacity. We've now built up a 90-day stockpile of PPE. We actually have had to purchase a larger warehouse because we filled the existing state warehouse. And so that's a good thing. We have confidence there. We've also stockpiled test collection kits so that we're less susceptible to supply chain issues that have occurred from time to time, either in other parts of the country or around the world. We've partnered with a number of private sector labs to scale up laboratory testing capacity here in Connecticut, which we aren't fully utilizing or even really close to fully utilizing right now. So we have in-house capacity here in Connecticut if we need to scale up testing further. And we've put in place testing strategies, particularly for our vulnerable communities, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, our prisons, our urban populations, which in many cases are being recognized as among the best in the nation. And the results, I think, in those populations kind of speak for themselves in terms of how we've been doing with very low number of cases and test positivity in those communities. And then we've also put in place rapid response teams. So, as you've seen over the last month, where we do have flare-ups, whether it's in Danbury or some of our colleges, we're able to very quickly mobilize additional testing capacity to bring in, get our arms around the situation, partner with the local officials to take more targeted actions as opposed to kind of the blanket actions that we were taking back in March and April. And then I'd also just point out, I think our hospitals as well are better prepared, both from a PPE perspective, but also in terms of the clinical understanding of how to treat COVID patients. I think has come a long way since those early days and gives us optimism as well if we do face a resurgence. So, again, in summary, I think we've seen a small uptick over the last month or so as we've, reopened K through 12 and colleges, but that's really stabilized. It really ticked up a couple of tenths of a percentage point on the test positivity rolling average, still top 5 in the nation on just about every COVID metric, whether it's positivity, new cases per 100,000, COVID hospitalizations per 100,000 population. We remain, in a position that most other states would certainly prefer. So that's a testament to all of you and all of our neighbors around the state. It's a team effort, as we all know, to keep COVID under control as we try to get our economy fired back up. So let's talk about the economy. I think the governor, as you've probably all heard many times at this point, recognized early on that while some people, I think of public health considerations in the economy on kind of opposite ends of the scale, that you have to sacrifice one to benefit the other. I think the governor was one of the first who recognized that actually that's not the case, but rather they're closely linked, and that we can only really recover economically if we have stability and predictability around public health. We know that looking at other states where they've had huge flare-ups, if people are concerned to go out, they're not going to go to restaurants. They're not going to want to send their kids to school. They're not going to want to kind of get back to normal from a commercial perspective. And so that impact on consumer confidence with regards to where we stand on the public health metrics is critical. The disruptions to workplaces, right? We've all dealt with. If you have widespread community transmission, you're constantly dealing with disruptions around, having to isolate and quarantine, losing people, closing schools, et cetera. So that is a critical linkage as well. And then there's all the other obvious things, the impacts on travel and interstate commerce and so forth. So we've really been focused on looking at them hand in glove as we make decisions and move forward. So I think another important consideration that we spent a lot of time thinking about in those early days in that survival period was recognizing that it's a lot easier to bounce back when you try to limit the damage in the first place. And so, while we did have to shut down, much of the economy in March to make sure we could get the transmission under control, the governor decided to keep some critical industries open throughout that period in ways that many other states did not. So for example, we kept the manufacturing industry open. We kept the construction industry open as essential businesses with the belief that those businesses could be operated safely and that it represents such a large and important segment of the Connecticut economy that that was worth doing. And in retrospect, I think that was an important and correct call that did help us kind of moderate the depth of that economic hit that we took in the first half of the year. But also as we got into that reopening phase, where, even before the hospitalizations really started to kind of crest and start coming back down, the governor took the action to create a reopen advisory group, bringing in a lot of experts from not just within our administration and a lot of our key commissioners, but people from outside, from medical and public health communities, academics, business leaders, to start thinking together about how do we reopen and how do we reopen safely. And I think that work was instrumental in putting out those phase 1 guidelines, the phase 2 guidelines, the sequencing and the thought that went into that, the protections that businesses have put in place that enabled us to get back to that 95% reopen threshold when at the time we were getting letters from all sorts of people saying this is too soon, you're doing it too fast, you're going to cause a huge resurgence. And in fact, what happened was, as a result of all those precautions, the metrics actually continued to stay stable at very low levels, as we all know, throughout the summer. So, since then, although we've been at that kind of 90%, allowed to be open, we're very clear that both for the 5% of businesses that still are not allowed to be open, as well as a lot of the other businesses, small businesses, Main Street businesses, and large businesses as well, where we're not able to operate at full capacity because the customer demand isn't there, or other disruptions, restrictions on capacity limits and so forth, that these are really difficult, in many cases dire times for those businesses, particularly as we start to head into the winter. Businesses that have been surviving based on outdoor capacity, restaurants as an example, are facing a new set of challenges now that we are spending a lot of time focused on. So again, more to come on that this afternoon, but I think from an economic perspective overall, we know we have much more work to do. We know we've got a long way to continue to rebuild, but I think it's worth noting that as we sit here today, Moody's and CNN have been tracking the economic recovery of states. And we are at a point now where we've recovered about 84% of the economic activity in Connecticut versus pre-pandemic levels, which ranks us 8th best nationally. And one of, if not the best in New England amongst our kind of regional neighbors. So that's encouraging. I think we're seeing other encouraging signs. We are also one of only 8 states that have actually seen an increase in real estate listings this year. I think we all know anecdotally, the real estate market, the residential real estate market at least, is very hot in Connecticut right now. A lot of people taking another look at this state. We've got our universities open and staying open. We've got our K through 12 educational system open much more broadly than our neighboring states right now, and doing, I think, a very good job of easing back into the new school year. And as I mentioned, we're still, despite all of that, in the top 5 in the nation on just about every measure, which with regards to COVID. So, we're still clearly in the middle of this journey. We still have a long way to go to build back. We know that this virus is out there. It is highly contagious. It's a constant risk. And I think we're all anticipating this winter could be a challenge, right, with a lot of the factors coming together. But That said, I think we're optimistic that we can continue to maintain this balance that we have done over the last several months of alignment between our public health interventions and our efforts to recover our economy, help our businesses get through this, and protect jobs in the state. So finally, let me turn attention then to what we're doing on those fronts with regards to the state and state government. So first of all, in the short term, the story up in Hartford is actually mostly good news. So for those of you who don't follow this stuff closely, we recently closed the books on fiscal 20 with a surplus, believe it or not, a small surplus, $39 million, but a surplus nonetheless, which several months ago, no one really had any sense of how bad this could get from a fiscal perspective. So that was encouraging. And in addition to that, we were able to actually not start draining the rainy day fund, but actually made another sizable deposit into the rainy day fund based on the volatility cap. So we actually last fiscal year deposited another $569 million into the budget reserve fund. And in so doing, actually maxed out the rainy day fund. There's a statutory cap at 15% of the budget. So we maxed that out. And then what happens next is you start depositing any excess against our pension liabilities. So we were able to put another $62 million against our pension liabilities as well. So, we closed the books on the last fiscal year with a rainy day fund of $3.1 billion, 15% of our budget, which actually ranks Connecticut as having the 7th strongest rainy day fund as a percentage of budget in the nation. So, short term, that's all goodness. Now, longer term is a bit of a different story. We do have a deficit forecast for the fiscal year we just started of over $2 billion. I would say that forecast, as Secretary McCaw points out frequently, is early and very uncertain as we continue to monitor, how the pandemic impacts our economy and how it plays out. We'll get our first consensus revenue estimate in November, and I think that'll be the first, better look at where trends are headed, and we're hopeful that we see that deficit forecast narrow as we get to November. But we're also going to be heading into a new budget negotiation in the next legislative session, which will start early next year, where there are multi-billion-dollar budget deficits forecast for fiscal 22 and 23 that we will need to work on. And of course, the big issue is, as we all know, the biggest issue is our debt and unfunded pension liability, which at about 33% of state GDP is one of the highest in the nation. And so that's a challenge that we we have to deal with as well. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing about all that. So first of all, we know that the goal as we look forward is both to avoid, to the extent we possibly can, tax increases and provide tax certainty to businesses and residents of Connecticut, but at the same time protect the critical services that we provide as a state that so many people rely on, particularly at a time like this when so many people are suffering, so many people depend on the social safety net that we provide, and making sure that we do everything we can to protect those services as well. And the governor, dating back into his campaign all the way through the early days of his administration pre-pandemic, has been very focused on the middle path, the better path, which is how do we make state government more efficient? How do we modernize state government to reduce our cost structure while still maintaining or even enhancing the quality of the services we provide? And so, we embark on this work recognizing that actually many people aren't aware, but the size of state government, the number of state employees, has actually decreased substantially over the last decade. And, we're down over 10% in terms of headcount. But that said, I think we all in the Lamont administration believe that there's still immense room for further improvement, further opportunity in terms of our cost structure. That I can tell you, I come from the technology industry, right? Before I took this as my first kind of stint in public service, I spent over almost 20 years in the technology industry. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at that, and we are well behind the times in terms of adopting modern technology and fully utilizing it to streamline processes and to make us more efficient. We're not alone in that regard, by the way. As I talk to my peers in other states, the public sector is, I think most folks are probably aware, tend to be late adopters in many cases, but nonetheless, we're in a very fortunate position where a lot of the technology that I think we can really benefit from in Connecticut has been really stress tested and proven out in large other complex enterprises, both in the private sector and some other public sector entities, so that there's an enormous opportunity there. The other dynamic that we're very focused on is that we have a significant wave of retirements coming amongst our state employee population. Our teams have estimated that perhaps as much as a quarter of our state employees may retire within the next 1.5 to 2 years, based on some terms in the state employee contracts and changes to pension calculations. So for all of you who run businesses, large or small, you know that when you're facing 25% of your employees potentially walking out the door, that's a huge risk, right? In terms of the continuity of operations, the experience and institutional knowledge that will likely be leaving. But it's also an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to re-baseline, to relook at how we do some of the things that we do. Again, how we utilize technology, how we collaborate across our agencies. Today, we don't do enough of that, and there's enormous opportunity there. So the last legislature before the governor joined, on a recommendation of the Fiscal Stability Commission, implemented a requirement that the governor hire a consultant to look for efficiency opportunities and cost savings opportunities. That did not get followed through on at the end of the prior administration, but we're about to kick that project off now as we look forward. Secretary McCaw and I will be leading that effort. Looking at opportunities across agencies, bigger thoughts beyond some of the low-hanging fruit that either has already been plucked or we're addressing in parallel, but looking at bigger opportunities to improve the state's cost structure, improve the services we provide. And so as a backdrop to that, the last thing I would just touch on is a little bit more about some of the technology work that we are doing already, particularly that could be of interest to the business community here. I guess probably a month ago now, we announced the launch of business.ct.gov, which is an initiative that continued on through the pandemic as we just kind of took all the work remote. But this is a website which I encourage you to go visit if you haven't, where we've brought together all of the information and resources about running a business in Connecticut into one more modern website. But it's not just a website. This is really going to be the portal and the one-stop shop for businesses in Connecticut to come, not just for information, but for all of the transactions that they need to undertake to operate in Connecticut. So the first step that was included in the initial rollout was a wizard-like functionality or a tool whereby someone interested in forming a new business can answer questions that sequentially lead them through a workflow and share with them a checklist at the end of exactly what they need to do to start their business. For those of you who haven't tried to start a business in Connecticut in a while, you can contrast that to the prior model, which is the information was quite scattered and you'd have to go to a number of different agency websites typically to try to figure it out for yourself. And the presentation of information at those agency websites was more of the, list every statutory citation and all the legalese and long web pages of things that are hard to understand. And let the reader try to figure out for themselves what they need to worry about and all the rest of the stuff that they don't need to worry about. And so we flipped that model on its head, and now we're really trying to hide all that complexity from the business owner, the entrepreneur, and through this wizard, just share with them the information that they need to know based on the industry that they're going to be operating in, their location, and the other factors that drive the different types of needs they may have from a revenue services or Department of Labor or Secretary of State perspective. The other thing that's exciting about this, maybe more so to me as a technology person than the average person, is this is really the umbrella over the top through which we will also start to replace and sunset some of the legacy systems that the agencies rely on. So the very antiquated systems that have been in the news a lot at the Department of Labor, as we've rolled out a number of new unemployment programs through the pandemic has been one everyone's aware of, but you probably won't be surprised to know that almost every agency that has high transaction volumes has their own equivalent of that type of system that is extremely old, extremely custom built and fragile, and very few people who know how it works anymore. So we're going to use this business.ct.gov platform, which is on a modern SaaS cloud platform with Salesforce, to over time start to sunset these legacy systems, bring all this data, all the workflow into one place, which will have huge benefits for our customers, the business owners of the state, have huge benefits for us internally in terms of the efficiency of the workflow that we can drive. It'll also have huge benefits to all of us in terms of being able to knit together the data that we collect as a state. Right now, it largely exists in silos all across our different agencies. But when you get it all into a common platform like this with the integrations, you can start to ask questions of the data to help policymakers understand programs that are working, programs that are not working, as well as help businesses start to use artificial intelligence to identify trends in businesses and render for them opportunities and resources that they may not have been aware of, but that based on their business trends and profile, they might be able to benefit from. So huge opportunities here that, as you can tell, hopefully I'm extremely excited about, particularly as we reclaim a little bit of our calendar space from COVID to refocus on a lot of this stuff. So a lot more to come, but hopefully that's a little bit of a teaser on some of the really exciting stuff that we're working on in our efforts to modernize and make state government more efficient and more responsive to all of our citizens and businesses in the state. So, so hopefully that's a helpful overview, and delighted to take any questions that you have.
Great, thanks, Josh. If anyone has questions, just put them in the Q&A, and we'll feed them to Josh. Josh, you talked a little about the technology on DOL. You know, I think it was last week the announcement came out on DRS, you know, Revenue Services Agency as well, and the new portal that they launched, and they've been working closely with the CBIA tax subcommittee as well. Is that part of this kind of technology movement that you're talking about for efficiencies and ease?
It is. It's a great example. So yeah, our Department of Revenue Services has been working for over a year now to implement a new platform for all of their activities. The first rollout that we announced was focused on a number of business taxes, so withholding and sales and use tax, remittance. So I know a lot of businesses have already been using that. I've seen the metrics, and the adoption rate is high, and the feedback seems very positive. So it's a much more modern, intuitive system. It's also, you know, again, a more modern, commercially supported platform that's in use by 30 other states. So we'll benefit from not relying on legacy custom software, but we'll have a much better system there. And then over the coming years, in line with the tax filing deadlines and then the windows that DRS has to implement new systems, we'll continue to roll out additional tax types all the way through personal income tax at the end. But again, that's a system that is the DRS kind of system of record, but that will plug into this business.ct.gov framework, as well as, I should mention, there's an equivalent version of this for all of us as in our private lives as citizens, residents, for all of our personal interactions with state government. Same technology architecture, one focused on businesses, one focused on individuals. So it'll plug in there as well. And so that was an exciting milestone. You'll also see on the Bond Commission agenda next week funding for a modernization of the Secretary of State's transactional system, Concord. Many people remember, I remember when I was CEO of a small business in Connecticut not that long ago, having to wrestle with Concord a few times. No one will be sad to see that system go, and we're going to undertake that project here very shortly as well.
I used Concord often in my prior life, and it was never fun. So I'm glad that I think that will be great for businesses doing searches and obviously being able to do filings and things like that. So that's fantastic. We got a few questions, Josh, from the audience here. One is one that's on a lot of folks' minds, right? The hospitality and aerospace sectors. We've got a big commercial aerospace sector here in Connecticut. We know about hospitality and a lot of the hotels and restaurants taking hits. You know, they've experienced significant slowdown. Is there anything that you can share that might suggest the role the state will play with this issue?
Sure. You know, with regards to the aerospace industry, this is a really tough one, right? This is obviously an industry that's so impacted by customer demand. And as we all know, it's an industry that's really been hammered, starting with obviously the commercial airline industry, working backwards. That said, I think people saw some exciting announcements earlier this week. JetBlue, significant route expansions at Bradley to the West Coast service, international service. So that was great to see. Very bullish, I thought, play that probably not a lot of people saw coming or expected. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come in the aerospace industry. And that is, if we can keep COVID under control and people regain confidence and we learn more about the safety of air travel, I think we're seeing more studies come out that suggest that commercial air travel may be less risky than folks might have originally thought. And that analysis continues to get published and come out. That could be helpful. But there's a lot of big macro trends there that I'm not sure we have a huge amount of control over in Connecticut, obviously. With regards to the hospitality industry, look, in a set of an industry and a set of business segments that have been absolutely hammered, we've been trying hard to do everything we can to support this industry. I think folks saw we actually invested in an advertising tourism campaign over the summer. Another one that I think not a lot of people saw coming, and I think when Commissioner Lehman first proposed it back in maybe April or May, and when we were still really kind of turning the corner on COVID, we're all saying, yeah, that's tourism, really. But we did it, and I think it was very successful based on all the metrics we saw. We just advertised to our neighboring states where they also fortunately had low infection rates, so we weren't risking a lot of risky out-of-state travelers coming in. But I think that helped in many cases get us through the summer. But now as we turn to the fall and the winter, we know there's another set of challenges. And so as I alluded to, we'll be talking more about that this afternoon and some of the things we're going to look to do for those businesses in particular to help us get through what we know is going to be a challenging winter.
And how about restaurants, Josh? Is kind of a question along those lines too. Winter coming, we've been talking a lot about that. Do they just go back to kind of that takeout curbside model that they had when restaurants were kind of shut down early during COVID, or any thoughts that you guys had on alternatives?
Yeah, again, I don't want to steal the governor's thunder for this afternoon, but I'd recommend if you're from the restaurant industry or interested in restaurants, be a good press conference to watch this afternoon at 4.
We won't steal his thunder. We don't want to get any of us in trouble here. So
that's right.
Another question, Josh, and I've heard this from a couple of members. So I don't know how the procurement works with DOT. I don't know if that's for your group, and you obviously handle a lot of procurement for the state, or DOT does it directly. But I don't know if you're aware, DOT has been contemplating maybe some rule changes on their procurement practices, some cap removals that may favor some larger organizations, mostly probably out-of-state organizations. Are you aware of that at all, or any comment about where we may be going with rule changes on procurement?
I have not been involved in that, to be honest. I'll look into it. We certainly have a preference for doing business with our in-state companies wherever we possibly can. And we always balance that, of course, with getting the best deal for taxpayers as well. But I'll look into that. DOT does do their own procurement for the most part, but Commissioner Giletti and I speak regularly, and I'll certainly ask him about that.
That's great. I know something the manufacturing community talked about over the past decade, maybe with the different administrations, obviously, was kind of a favored nation clause, if you will, right? So if a state contractor is within 5% of the next bid, then you try to keep the monies here. So not only does that keep the money in the state, but that generates jobs in the state, which generate follow-on jobs as well. So we're happy to work with you and your team on following up on that question and anything else we can do around policies.
Absolutely. And we do have a number of procurement programs where there are in-state preferences along the lines of what you described. There's a lot of information about that on the DAS website. It is a tricky issue, as people know, because it cuts both ways, right? If we saw a lot of other states doing that type of thing, it could be challenging. I remember, for example, the software business that I ran before coming here, 95% of my revenue came from outside of Connecticut. So extremely dependent on our sales to other states. And if we were disadvantaged in those states versus our competitors, that would have been a real challenge for us. And so there's a potential arms race you set off if you go too far on some of this stuff, but it's a balance we're constantly trying to get a feel for. But as I mentioned, obviously our preference is always to do business with our Connecticut-based companies.
That's great. A change of subject here and another question. So asking for an update on the Governor's Workforce Council, and maybe on your response, you want to weave in one of the first big initiatives of that council was the creation of the Workforce Development Unit, I believe it's called, which a fellow manufacturer, Kelly Marie Valeris, is appointed the executive director of. So how about a little update on that?
Sure. That the work of the Workforce Council is forging ahead. We had a little bit of a pause or delay related to the pandemic response, but has really spun back up, particularly with Kelly on board now, as you mentioned. I mean, we're so fortunate to have her in this role, given her experience and background and energy. I mean, it's just fantastic. And so, the work is spinning back up, particularly with the focus, obviously, with the pandemic as the backdrop on how the in-demand industries have evolved. And there are a lot of industries where, we're seeing a continued very high demand for skills, and making sure that we're working strategically with our employers, with our educational institutions ranging from higher ed, our community colleges, all the way down into K through 12 to make sure that we're pumping out the talent that we need to fuel our economy here in Connecticut. And I think that group will actually be making some more public announcements around their agenda and some of their conclusions of the first year of work in their report and analysis in the coming weeks. So much more to come on that in the near future.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say already CT affiliate, which is all focused on K through 12 education reform and closing the opportunity gap. I'm happy to say that a lot of our policy agendas this year from that affiliation are just in line with the workforce policy recommendations too. They're linked step and step. So that's real positive to have the business community behind some of those education reforms. It will make our education system better. It will make our workforce and pipeline even stronger too. So that's great to see that. And it's interesting. I mentioned at the press conference yesterday, just to get your thoughts on this, Josh. I think some businesses think, well, we've got record number of unemployment, so there's just a lot of skilled labor available out there. But some of our busier sectors, defense, manufacturing, financial services, medical, they're still having a hard time finding skilled labor. So they have actually job openings while we have this record level of unemployment. It's a weird dynamic. Any thoughts about that?
It is. And, we saw some of those dynamics pre-pandemic, but the pandemic has certainly, really exposed them and amplified them in many cases. So I think this gets back to the importance of that Workforce Council and the work that we need to do to have the resources in place to reskill people where we need to and give them the opportunities to change careers, change industries. I'm not going to personally, pontificate on this topic, but I've seen a number of articles that speculate about, the degree to which some of these, more service sector jobs will come back, right? Or whether this was an acceleration of some of the longer term trends and, the importance of, looking at, where the demand will be going forward in Connecticut, which skills will be hot, and making sure that we're creating every possible opportunity for people who want to change careers, want to change industries, have the resources and the support to be able to do that. And that's really what it's all about. This is one of the issues that the governor is most passionate about, right? Making sure that we're using every tool in the toolkit here in Connecticut, in particular, our really strong educational resources and supports in ways that are much more aligned with businesses who know and probably can forecast better than we can, where the puck is going as opposed to even where it might be today. So we're really excited about that work, and I can assure you this is a topic the governor spends a disproportionate amount of time talking about and pushing the team on, given the importance to our long-term economic success.
I agree. Don't take our foot off the pedal on that one, on the workforce development. That was critical. So we got Josh for about another 15 minutes. If you've got some Q&A, just go ahead and post it down there. We don't always have access to Josh. He's usually behind the scenes working hard and doing a lot of things. So appreciate the time. Josh, one that's come up quite a bit in conversation is with the surplus that you mentioned, coming out of the last fiscal year. We know we have a deficit in front of us, but whether to revisit another round of business loans at the state level. We did I think it was called the bridge loan back in April. And as you know, it was originally 25 million. It went up to 50 million because it was oversubscribed within 24, 48 hours. Very, very quick response. And so some folks have called for another round of that. One of the responses, that I talked to people about is while that was helpful, it clearly pales in comparison to what happens at the federal level. How about some thoughts around that?
Yes, another topic of frequent conversation with the governor and our senior staff. I think we have all been hoping and waiting for the federal government to take further action. As you point out, Chris, their ability to print money is, not one that we have, and therefore the resources that they can bring to bear and have brought to bear are the ones that can really most substantially move the needle. And, unfortunately, they haven't moved, and we're getting increasingly, resigned to the likelihood that they will not move either before the election or potentially through a lame duck period, regardless of how the election shakes out. And so, if we don't see some sort of breakthrough in the very near term here, I think you will see us come forward with some additional programs in that area. They will, by definition, be more modest than what we saw with PPP, for example. But we are sensitive, and Commissioner Lehman has been working on different scenarios that we might be able to bring to bear to provide some additional support to help businesses get through the fall and the winter, recognizing a lot of the headwinds that so many of our businesses continue to face.
Yeah, 50 million may sound like a lot to folks on this call, but I think the average ended up being about 20,000 per business, comparing that to the millions that businesses were able to get under the CARES Act. So we're continuing to push the federal delegation. Obviously, we have a lot of support here in Connecticut with our delegation, but continuing to try to support. We need those monies from DC. Obviously, we need another round of federal spending. You had mentioned, Josh, in your comments about the real estate market. I know you're not a real estate market expert, so don't worry, this question won't go there. But we have had a record number of influx. We saw negative migration for the last probably decade in Connecticut, and now we've got tens of thousands of people moving into the state. And this question that we have in the Q&A is kind of around that, more on the business side. Connecticut's been trying to woo companies to relocate here for some time. Is that still active? Is that put on pause during COVID? There's been some thoughts from the business community about maybe having a robust strategy around that because kind of striking while the iron's hot, if you will.
Yes, there is a lot going on there. Again, Commissioner Lehman, also the team at Advanced CT, which has been, the former CERC group, which we've rebranded and repurposed to really be the kind of the business recruiting engine for the state of Connecticut. Has been active. There's a lot of outreach going on. There's a lot of work going on. A lot of it is perhaps a little bit more behind the scenes right now. We do have strong partnerships with our neighbors, particularly New York. And we want to be respectful of the challenges that they're facing as well. But at the same time, we're fielding a lot of inbound inquiries and having a lot of important discussions with not just individuals, but with businesses, large and small, existing and potentially new, that are really taking a fresh look at Connecticut. Right? I think looking at how we've managed the COVID crisis, looking at some of the aspects of our quality of life, our educational system, what Connecticut has always had as strengths, our workforce, our innovation rankings, which may have fallen a little out of favor in favor of the kind of the big city life, over the past several years, but maybe that pendulum has swung. It's still early days. I don't think any of us are taking anything for granted or feeling like, there's still a significant amount of uncertainty about how that really shakes out in the end. But suffice it to say, there is a lot of work going on, recognizing those dynamics. And we are hopeful that, there is a silver lining in all of this for Connecticut, that a lot of additional people and a lot of businesses are taking a fresh look at us and really liking what they see.
We have a lot to offer right now. Obviously, the desire to have more of a rural community, and we've got a great education system and a tremendous workforce. And so let's strike while it's hot. We've got another question in the chat box, but this one is around the transportation. So another shift here, but we failed to pass kind of the lockbox protection when we were all talking about tolls a while back. And with the budget deficit coming, is there any measures being taken by the administration to protect the special transportation fund?
Sure. Well, I think the last I think the budget in the last administration, there was a lockbox on transportation put in place. I think there are people who question whether that has holes in it or not, but suffice it to say, the governor, as evidenced by where he invested so much of his time and political capital in his first year around transportation funding, is completely committed to reinvigorating and reinvesting in our transportation infrastructure. Obviously, his plan for how to do that didn't get through last year, but that doesn't mean that it's not a topic that he is not continue to be passionate about. And part of that is protecting our special transportation fund, and getting back to work on that topic, because the problem is not solved. It wasn't solved last year as a result of where we ended up, and so there will be more to do there for sure. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that again in the next session.
I'm sure we will. Here's another one around healthcare, well, and the nonprofits in general, Josh. So many businesses that partner with the state to provide community healthcare and support services have been challenged to keep up with the increased need for services and pay rates. What are the plans to partner with them to reinvent the working relationship that will allow them to help with the retirement issue and be able to pay reasonable pay to their workforce? So maybe talk a little bit about the nonprofit piece of the puzzle with the state employee retirement in response to that as well.
Sure. Yeah, we have so many partners, nonprofits who provide critical services to citizens of the state as contractors to our various agencies. And like many businesses, they have been adversely impacted by COVID and the pandemic and the impacts related to that. At the state level, we have done a lot to try to support them. Many of them have benefited, obviously, from federal supports as well. But there's still more to do, and we do know that. The dialogue continues regularly with our nonprofit partners about both short-term, how to help them get through this difficult time, as we are trying to do with all businesses in Connecticut that are struggling. And then, yes, longer term, of course, there's opportunity, right? Everything is kind of on the table right now in terms of what we'll need to be looking at and what we'll need to be considering as we look at this retirement wave, as we look at the structural deficits that we face, and look at what we can do to address them. And yes, recognize that it is critically important that all of the partners that we have in the state are able to do business with us in a way that enables them to run a business effectively and take care of their employees as well. And so this is a complex equation, as we all know, but our nonprofit partners are critical participants in state operations and in our overall economy as well.
And just to follow up to that, Josh, have you seen the state in the last, since your time with the administration, kind of moving that way, more use of the nonprofits?
I don't have data on that at hand. I don't know that we've seen a lot of huge swings so far. I mean, the reality is, pretty much all of this year, we've been in COVID mode, right? And there hasn't been a lot of big changes in terms of, who we're working with and who we're partnering with.
And we do know in the CARES Act that there obviously continues to be push around the structures, the organizational structures that are included in that, and getting nonprofits included in some of that federal funding, either one of the last rounds, and making sure that happens. Now looking toward chambers of commerce and making sure they're included in the federal CARES Act as well. So that will be, as you said, it seems to be at a stalemate now, but clearly it can be a big opportunity to help with some of this recovery.
Absolutely.
Josh, we know you well, and you're a very recent person. So kind of maybe conclude with these thoughts, and just in your mind, there's some of us, and I was one of them before, jumping into this role and saying, I'm tired of kicking the state and I want to be part of the solution. There's some of us that still maybe kick the state a little bit, and we're no good. We should be better. You see what's happening. You see the budget deficit. You know what you're doing behind the scenes to turn the state around, working with the governor and his administration. What would you say to some of those people who are still maybe kicking the state a little bit and make it sound like there's no hope for us?
One of my favorite topics. Yeah, listen, look, first of all, I'm a glass half full. I'm an optimist. And so I come to this from that perspective. I mean, look, we certainly are aware that, within our pension liabilities and our state budget, we have challenges, right? There's no question about that. But you have a governor who is committed to addressing those challenges in a way that is responsible and predictable and helps drive growth and jobs. And all of these challenges we have, he knows, get a lot easier if we're driving growth and jobs, job creation. And look, even beyond Governor Lamont, I mean, I think we need to, and I remember, I think my very first CBIA board meeting, I remember a discussion on this topic because, I do come to this as a perspective of, from the technology industry, from someone who was a CEO of a software startup here, who I think a key element of our success was access to the amazing talent that we have here in Connecticut. And the lower cost of doing business, right? Not having to be based in New York or Boston or Silicon Valley, where a business like ours might have more logically been based, having to compete with Google and Facebook, every day for talent. It was a key, being based in Connecticut, on the shoreline with the quality of life that we have here was a real differentiator for us. And I think it's easy for us sometimes to lose the forest for the trees and recognize what a great quality of life we have here, how much our employees love living here, that knowing that they can send their kids to great schools, that they can be on the water, they can be at a ski mountain, that they have access to a workforce here in Connecticut, which is consistently ranked as one of the top 5 on every measure, whether it's advanced degrees or most innovative or most patents. It is a great state. And, the challenges that we have at the state level, we've stopped digging those holes. We're working our way out of them now. So that'll take some time, but we're on the way back with those structural issues. And I'm confident that under Governor Lamont's leadership, we'll continue making progress there, particularly as we rebuild out of COVID. But it is a great state. It's a great place to live. And I am always welcome to join any meeting where I get the opportunity to do a little bit of cheerleading, because I've lived in other parts of the country, other parts of the world too. So I come to this with perspective, as I'm sure many of you do. But my wife and I came back here to raise our family. There was no question about our desire to do that because we love it here. It's a great state. So hope you all agree, and hope you'll also join us in helping to sell our state, become salespeople for our state wherever you get the opportunity.
Yeah, similar experience. I ran some locations outside the state over the past couple of years, and the grass isn't always greener on the other side, as some folks say, right? It was amazing, some of the labor laws that I was running into in the West Coast and other countries, and real difficult challenges. And it makes you appreciate what you have, because you didn't appreciate it at the time until you get a taste for something else. And as I mentioned to the governor yesterday, and certainly extended to you, we want to be there. We want to be that collaborative partner with the state, CBIA, and the business community does. I think solutions are better when we collaborate together, no doubt about it, when we get more diverse thoughts in the room, and rather than just having a few people make the decisions. And you guys have been great about reaching out to us. So we really appreciate that. You'll hear us cheerleading some of those positive stories, because the business community, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, does some amazing things for local communities in the states. And it doesn't get a lot of credit sometimes, especially some of our biggest businesses. They're more faceless and always looked at as the nasty corporate business, when they do a lot of real good stuff for our state. And we want to get those stories out there and those messages out there. So we're right there with you, cheerleading that. But we'll certainly want to make sure we address our problems. But with every challenge is an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Josh, can't thank you enough for your time today. I know it's very valuable, and we'll let you get back to run the state, and hopefully grab a cup of coffee on your way back and get to enjoy it. So thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks again, Chris. And thanks for all you're doing, and everyone out there. Thank you for all of your hard work getting through this challenging time. We'll get through this and we'll come out better on the other side. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, I want to introduce the moderator of our next panel, which is a fantastic group. Pete Senna is the CEO and Chief Creative Officer of Digital Surgeons. And Pete is the founder and director of Digital Surgeons, a global creative consultancy that helps brands discover and design new opportunities for growth. He's built and led cross-functional teams that have delivered a number of successful, award-winning, multi-channel programs and activations, ranging in scale from venture-backed startups to Fortune 50 organizations. Pete prides himself in partnering with CEOs, CMOs, and creative leaders to help them set, plan, and achieve their vision. Pete, I look forward to having you moderate this panel and hearing some interesting things.
Likewise. Thanks, Chris. Really excited to be here. I wonder if maybe we can just pull the slide up for just a quick moment, just to introduce the other panelists. Fantastic. Well, first and foremost, I can't see the other panelists' video here, which will certainly make it easier to connect with them. But I don't know if the AV team could flip everybody's video to on. Gotta love these Zoom things here. So really excited to have just a great group of folks who are making Connecticut a resilient and continuing to grow and innovate state here. So just really excited to be here. I've been a Connecticut resident my whole life. And I believe now more than ever, it's things like what CBIA is doing with panels and things like this that I think are just really transformative to what we're doing. So please join me in sort of giving a virtual welcome to just a great group of folks. We got William, who's a technology leader at Triple Helix Corporation. Melissa doing amazing things in marketing and hospitality and community building. And then of course the work that Miranda is doing at the Food Share, just really driving advocacy and growth. So with that, we'll sort of switch over to them and just please join me in welcoming them to the virtual stage here.
Thank you for
Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. So knowing that we're all virtual, so William and Miranda, I see you. I'm just wondering if we could get Melissa on video as well. And Miranda and everyone, and William, you can hear me just fine?
Yes.
Fantastic. Gotta love this. It's like a bad Saturday Night Live episode, right? Awesome. So I know Melissa, I'm sure she's going to be hopping on in just a second. She's probably playing the Zoom tag that we all are these days. So with that, I just want to say thank you again for everybody. Really, so the one thing that when I got asked by the CBIA team, which, is we've obviously been a member for a long time and really love the work we've been able to do with them over the years. Just can't say thank you enough for how supportive they've been under Joe's leadership, and now with Chris joining the team and sort of going on in a very challenging time. So I think the path back. So let's just talk about that today. One of the first things I'd love to do, just to kind of kick it over to my great panelists here today, is just I want to talk about some tactics that you folks are using to really connect with people in your community. Obviously, Miranda. Now more than ever, the demand for what you do has really surged. So can you maybe talk a little bit about just how you're connecting with the community, with your constituents, under just the challenges that you're faced with COVID-19?
Sure, I'd be happy to. COVID's been a challenging time. I think our system at Food Share has never been presented with quite this scenario, and as businesses across the state and country are seeing. At Food Share, we're the regional food bank that serves Hartford and Talon counties. And what that means is we provide food to food pantries and meal programs to help people who are food insecure. The need for food assistance has skyrocketed during COVID. We're seeing many new faces. There's a study that estimates that food insecurity across the state will increase by 40% this year because of COVID. What that means is that we've had to distribute more food than ever before. And we've even launched a new pop-up distribution that many people have probably heard about at Rensselaer Field in East Hartford. We picked that location because it's the biggest parking lot in our service area, and it needs to be big because we're serving 2,000 people a day who are driving through to get food. And I've talked with the people that we serve at that site. It's people who are newly unemployed, who never thought they'd be in a situation where they're struggling to choose between food and other bills. It's seniors on fixed incomes. We've even spoken to a few people who used to donate to Food Share, and now they're finding themselves on the other end needing help. So we've had to adjust, but staying resilient, staying open-minded and flexible in how we do what we do is all we can.
Well, Miranda, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Just really inspiring to me, and I know everybody else that's tuning into this now or in the future. So Miranda, tell me something. When sort of all this happened, I mean, I got to get to know you a little bit last week when we were sort of prepping for today, and frankly, you're an inspiration in many ways, and I hope that the group can get to see some of the sides of you that I did last week. The question I'd ask for you, Miranda, is when you were hit with all this, you've got this just really good, very positive disposition, a lot of hope, a lot of positivity. I think energy is a really powerful thing. Can you talk to folks right now who might be sort of down and out, really wondering how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to get through this? Talk to me about how you keep that positivity and how you keep that charge. It's just something that really inspired me.
Well, thank you for that. You're too kind to me. will say that you have to stay positive through all of this. Even though it's been really challenging for me personally as a professional, this has been a really challenging time. FoodShare is an essential organization. Our team has been coming to work every day, working longer hours than ever before. So for me, it's been a balance of how do I support my team on a personal level. We're all facing changes, but how do we also step up and do more work than we've ever done before? So we think about silver linings. What are the silver linings that have come out of COVID that have shown us that we can be better together? And the other thing that inspires me every day is talking to the people we serve. So resilient, so strong, and so grateful. And the Greater Hartford community has stepped up in an enormous way to support us. And so finding that human kindness and empathy, I think that's growing through the pandemic, or I hope it's growing. We're seeing each other in new ways. We get to see people's houses when they're at Zoom. We get to see their pets. We get to see their kids. That's nice.
I love that, Miranda. That's so fantastic. And I do want to make sure, just for everybody that's listening to this and wonders how they can help, if, certainly if they're in a position to be able to contribute, obviously ctpantryresources.com is the website. So CT, like Connecticut, pantryresources.com is the website that folks can go on and learn a little bit more about how they can help and the great things that you're working on. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's the statewide resource that the state of Connecticut has pulled together. FoodShare only serves Hartford and Talon County. So if you're interested in getting involved across the state, that's a great resource. Our website is foodshare.org. And our counterpart that serves the rest of the state is Connecticut Food Bank.
Awesome. Yeah. And for everybody joining now, the CBIA team is popping that link over there in the chat. So you can click on that and hopefully check that out later. We really do appreciate that. So sort of, and obviously it goes without saying, anybody that's listening to this, CBIA.com for us has been, just such a resource. They've been fantastic. So kudos to everyone at the CBIA team and the editorial squad, for just keeping fresh, relevant, and accurate, great content on the site. I think that there's just some really great ways for us to be able to stay connected. The thing I want to talk about, Miranda, next, and I think this is a great question for William, is one of the things I've seen folks really doing to sort of come out of this is upskilling, right? So a lot of people have had, without the commutes and with for some of us that don't have small children at home that are requiring all of our attention, many folks have been really using that time to learn and upskill and take advantage of the power of technology. I'd love to sort of hear from William, who's doing amazing things with technology, but, in terms of helping businesses to become more technology enabled. So William, I'd love for you to talk to the organization. Obviously, we're not all quite as technical and savvy as you are, but just William, from your perspective, with this COVID-19 pandemic really putting us in a situation where face-to-face is really being redefined, as we see here today, all connected here on Zoom video. William, what are some tactics that folks can deploy or utilize to start using technology more to enable connection in these really challenging times?
Well, that's a good question. What a lot of companies can do, for the ones that can do this, and I know that not every company can, but for companies that have the ability to, and these are companies that use spreadsheets a lot. If you find yourself doing a lot of manual work that is harder now that you're working remotely, the best thing you can do is allow yourself to be a cloud-enabled type of company. Allow that transition to happen, because it's really where we're going over the next couple of years, and this pandemic has done nothing but accelerate that. I think it accelerated at least 5 years. So now would be a great time to start looking at your procedures and your process, and think to yourself, should I be working with all of these spreadsheets, or should I just automate these tasks? And that's what we've been helping companies do. So we've kind of had an interesting viewpoint during this pandemic, and most companies were suffering, and we were actually hit as well, but we were actually in a position to help other companies. Because we work with technology, we were able to help companies move their data to the cloud, eliminate a lot of those spreadsheets that they're drowning in, help them with their infrastructure, because some of their infrastructure was crumbling, and we would come in and help them with that. And as far as our existing customers, we understand that some of them actually ended up in a cash poor position. So we actually put in a stay of pay for those clients. So we understand their position, so we put a pause on the billing for that.
That's amazing. I can't stress enough how important it is to, contribute where you can in many cases. So William, really appreciate that. I think what William is really, really talking about for folks that aren't as close to technology as William and I are, is really this idea of the acceleration of digital transformation, right? So, I think some statistics are saying we went through about 5 to 6 years of transformation in 3 months with the pandemic. But really, I think the silver lining, just to get, to use some language from Miranda, which I think is inspiring, is the silver lining here is now more than ever, the different changes that you've been wanting to make to how you work and how your organizations work. Now more than ever is the time to sort of lean into some of the technology resources that are available. I know organizations like Google have released their Google Meet tool for free for a number of months. There's a lot of online education sites that have been releasing sort of free COVID relief and that sort of thing. If you're using technology platforms like Microsoft 365 or Google Suite, I know that you can sort of reach out to those folks and look for some delayed payments in some cases. So big technology, I think, has really stepped up during this pandemic to be able to make these things affordable and available to folks who might not necessarily be able to do that. And now I want to move a bit past technology, if that's okay, William. And I want to sort of touch on something that Melissa, who's doing a lot of work in hospitality specifically. So Melissa, hopefully you can hear me okay. I know you're dialed in.
Yes.
Awesome. So Melissa, you work in hospitality, and essentially overnight, that basically exploded and in a bad way, right? And I'd love to talk about just the resilience and the way that you've been innovating and really leaning into community. It's just so inspiring to me, and I want the whole group here listening to this to be able to understand, how do you tap into community and resilience when essentially your business blew up overnight in a bad way?
Yeah, it did. It was quite a shock at the start of the whole pandemic and how drastically business changed overnight. But, you got to kind of snap out of the shock and just figure out, okay, what are we going to do moving forward? What are the solutions? What are the opportunities? How can we pivot to be more of what our customers need from us right now in this difficult time? And also, let's, for our business and our sake, let's also look at all of the assets that we have available to us and figure out how we can use that for good, both for us and for our community moving forward. So in my instance, yes, we focus very primarily in travel and hospitality, which a lot of that business disappeared overnight. But I'm also very involved in the local Hartford community, and we have a platform called wehartford.com, which had always kind of been a side passion project of mine. But we looked at it and we're like, this is an asset. Everything is so hyper local right now, and people are looking, are very close to home and seeing what's going on. How can we use this for good in our community? And so what we did, just an example of one of the things that we did through this time when our business was a little bit slower, was we decided that we were going to look to the local hospitality area, some of those restaurants that are really struggling right now. And we used We Hartford, and we collaborated with some other local organizations, the Hartford Chamber of Commerce and the Bushnell Park Foundation, to create an event series called Picnic in the Park that was held right there in Bushnell Park. And we created a ton of revenue for our restaurant partners through these events, and also brought our community together in a really safe way outdoors when everyone was, feeling so disconnected. So we just really had to look at everything that we had available to us and figure out what we could do to help the community, to help ourselves, to help our clients.
I love that, Melissa. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I think you touched on something that I want to dig into a little bit here. When I think about just the sort of theme of this panel really being about the path back, the one thing I want to offer up as a reframe for this entire group now is this idea of let's not look back. Let's not look in the rear view. Let's not look backwards. Let's look forwards. And I think that, if there's one thing that, we've been hearing, we've been seeing, it's the importance of true human connections, right? So, the one thing that I think we were talking about, William, with technology is how many more things have been easier for us to connect, right? So obviously, I'm sure, you know, from a show of hands, virtual hands, just about all the people in the audience here virtually would probably say that they don't want to be on any more Zoom meetings because we're probably all zoomed out. But I do think that, you know, whether it be FaceTime or whatever your social platform of choice is, the ability to sort of connect on a one-to-one human basis and check in with people is important. But as Melissa just showed, bringing people together safely in person is really important. You know, we as humans, we are social creatures. We do need that energy and that connection. So, you know, Melissa, I'd love to just hear from your perspective, and maybe sort of get some dialogue between you and Miranda going around just what are some different ways that we can safely bring people together right now. I mean, obviously, of course, without saying wash your hands and wear your masks, right? I think that goes without saying. But in many situations, I'd love to hear just how did you go from a traditional way of community building and bringing folks together to pivot into bringing people together for that picnic in the park. And Miranda, you're going through some of that stuff as well, but I'd love to sort of kick it off with Melissa, and then we'll move over to Miranda.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a lot. We saw the need, we saw what needed to happen. We had the asset to make it happen, and we had the relationships in the community to move that forward. And whether it is online or offline or a hybrid version of the two, there's just so many opportunities. And I think that we all need to stop thinking, you know, we all need to look like into the future. We all need to look 2 steps ahead. We need to prepare ourselves for coming out of this. You know, we don't want to sit back and just wait until this is over. There's so many things that we can do right now to create those connections, create opportunities for people to get involved, whether it is through an organization like Food Share or a community event supporting local. I think we all as business leaders kind of need to do our part to look at what we can do to add to that. And add to like the energy and the optimism level of optimism that the state of Connecticut needs to have right now to, like you said, not just rebuild, but build better.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, I think the one thing for me that I'm a bit of a spiritual person, and when I think about just COVID-19, I mean, for hundreds, if not thousands of years, like we've all known, you know, the idea of, you know, war or famine or plague or any of these types of things. I think what was so, I think, eye-opening for me and sort of in conversations I've had with folks like yourself is just COVID's kind of that invisible enemy, right? It sort of showed up out of nowhere. And, you know, in many cases, while I think it has divided some of us, I think it's also really brought many of us together. And I think we see that with a lot of the work that Miranda's doing. I want to sort of remind the audience of a quote that, you know, Henry Ford was often quoted for saying, you know, who knows if he actually said it these days with how quotes fly around, right? I'm sure we've all seen our fair share of fake news, but I won't go there on today's panel in the morning. But I love this quote: whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So I think to Melissa's point and to Miranda's point about silver lining, I think if we go into this with a abundance mindset as opposed to a scarcity or a negative mindset, I think we can sort of come out on top. So with that point, Miranda, I'm going to sort of keep leaning on you for your amazing positivity, and I'm really grateful for it. Talk to me a little bit about, you said something that really struck me in the audience here, which was people who were previously donating are now on the other side of it and they are in need, right? So I think that goes down to the need for just human reciprocity, right? So, you know, for those of us that are fortunate enough to be here on our computers and with internet and with electricity and with food, what are some different ways that you're sort of helping encourage people who weren't previously contributing, but now are in a position to contribute? I just would love to understand that psychological mind shift that you and your team are working through.
Sure. Yeah, I can say that it's a very humbling experience to have to ask for help. And at Food Share, we strive to make it as welcoming as possible. And the ways that people can help get involved now. At Food Share, every year we have a big walk against hunger in Hartford every May. I don't know if any of you've been to that event, but we usually have about 4,000 people come, and it's our biggest fundraiser of the year. And it's how we help support our work year round. We weren't able to host our walk this year. And instead we transitioned this September. We did a virtual walk where we encouraged people to still fundraise and form teams online and then walk in their community, walk with their family, with their friends outside. We've had schools do walks. Still join with your community, take pictures, tag us on social media, and help show and raise awareness for hunger in your own community. So we're looking at creative ways like that. Thanksgiving's coming up. That's a time of great generosity as well, where our community always bands together. You might recall Scott Haney, he gets on the news and dresses up in a turkey costume. We're thinking now, how do we get that same level of community engagement where you go to the grocery store and buy a turkey to donate to a neighbor in need while social distancing? And we're working through that now, talking about virtual turkeys where you can donate online, but we're still trying to strive. How do we, that togetherness that Food Share is all about, how do we still embrace that?
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think when I think about togetherness, the technologist in me can't help but think about connections. And with that, I did see an audience question come in that I do want to jump on. And again, for those of you that didn't see it in the chat, there is a Q&A button on the webinar. So feel free to click on that. I'm going to be sort of fielding that. A question I saw from Ct Examiner here came in. And William, are there things you believe will change regarding technology? What do you see going back to normal after the pandemic? And then what will businesses need to adjust to? Is a question coming in from Ct Examiner.
I think that a lot of businesses will have to adjust to just the new normal, and that's working remotely from time to time. So there may be instances where you can go back to the office or you can open certain buildings up, but you may have to shut that down again, as you've seen in the news where people have tried it and they have to shut down for a few days for a cleaning or something like that. So being able to adjust to that type of hybrid model or just going full remote would definitely be a plus. I understand that. I've been living in Connecticut for a long time. I get it. We're not Silicon Valley. We're a different type of state here. I really do recommend that everyone start taking some type of basic technology or computer competencies courses. And you can even have it as someone just delivers that training for your business for the day, just so you can get comfortable with using communication tools like Zoom, Slack, and other email clients, and definitely want to get used to using two-factor authentication as well. Because everything is going online, your security footprint is going to definitely be changed. So you're no longer going to have to worry about security in the physical form. You're going to have to worry about securing your intellectual property digitally as well. So working from home may be great, but if you've got other devices connected to the network, going on shady sites or connected to shady apps or something like that, that can expose your work machine as well. So, it's definitely a good idea to start looking into how you can bring that business type of technology into the home safely, securely, and comfortably. And I can tell you right now that if you're working remotely, you definitely don't want to deal with security problems, compromises, and especially data loss or something like that. So that's why you want to start thinking about bringing your data into the cloud so you can actually access it anywhere.
No, that's great, William. Thanks so much for sharing that. One of the follow-up questions from our friends at Ct Examiner said is they wanted to know, just from the panelists here, what are some of the challenges that each of you are looking at into the future? I mean, obviously we're all battling many challenges now, personally and professionally, new different tension points, but I'd love to sort of just maybe start with Melissa on that one, because I know Melissa, you shared a little bit with myself and the panelists last week on this. What are some specific challenges that you see sort of immediately in front of you that you're already working through and that you think will continue to face in the upcoming months?
For my business, and I'm sure many other businesses, it's sales. And also just adjusting to the fact that I can no longer go to those industry-specific conferences and create, valuable relationships in person. And frankly, just a lot of the companies in my industry do not have the budget, and usually marketing, unfortunately, is the first thing to go. And so some of the things that we've had to do is completely relook at all of our service offerings and decide, what is important right now? What do our clients need right now in this moment? And what will they need in the next 6 months and 1 year? We really have to plan that out strategically and kind of rewrite our story. I mean, we relaunched a new website, redid all of our marketing materials to be able to speak to a lot of our new services and how we've adjusted and changed to be able to be what our customer needs. And then in terms of on the sales side, you know, we've finally taken, this has forced us to take the time to really look at our own, you know, internal marketing and advertising that we're doing for our business. You know, it's what we do for our customers every day, but now we need to look at how we can improve for ourselves. We need to invest the time into our business. And that is coming in the forms of, you know, a new content marketing platform, setting up a social networking platform for hospitality professionals right now. It's something that they need. A lot of them have been furloughed or laid off, unfortunately. And so we've created a platform where people can network and learn during this time when they're not working. And that also helps us create those relationships for later on down the line when they are replaced and are ready to work and rebound from all of this. So, you know, it's really a lot of good things have come out of this in terms of upping our game in all of the ways that we are representing our own business.
I love that, Melissa. And I definitely want to build on something you just said there, just for folks that might be wondering, you know, wow, my budgets have been cut. I'm having a hard time servicing my customers. Cash flow is challenging. One thing I definitely want to offer up, and obviously, you know, CBIA has a number of different business related resources. So definitely reach out to some folks on CBIA.com. There's some great resources on there to be able to help you understand how to navigate these challenges. I do want to offer up something to some folks. So if you do have people who are promising to pay, you know, I want to make sure you're thinking about things like, you know, potentially financing your accounts receivable. There's companies like AR Funding and Blue Vine that basically you can go and connect with. They can provide immediate cash if you do have proof of accounts receivables. For those of us that are in a service-based business now or in the future listening to this, you could potentially consider sort of deferred payments in some cases for folks. There's other things, services like ClearBank, which a lot of startups use to sort of get you know, some sort of micro loans or micro capital for the things that they're doing. So there are different solutions if you look at those things. And I think, you know, what Melissa's probably finding is not only finding new ways to connect with sales, but also finding new ways to be able to offer a pivot to the business model. So how you would normally get paid, you know, potentially needing to modify that in a recurring basis versus a one-time payment and that sort of thing. Just sort of moving over to, you know, making sure I hit that question that we got from the audience here. Miranda, what are some things that you see in front of you? So obviously, Melissa's challenged with conferences and human connections to build valuable relationships and generate sales. But what are some challenges that you see facing you? Obviously, you talked about the surge for demand. What are some other things that show up for you and your friends and family right now?
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind is at the start of the pandemic, we flipped the switch overnight to increase and scale our operations. But how do we do that in a sustainable manner? This pandemic isn't going away, unfortunately. And even if people start getting their jobs back, we know they're going to be hurting for a while. So how do we scale our operations? And that involves a lot of moving parts at a food bank. Our food supply has changed. Our volunteer procedures have changed. Some people in the audience may have volunteered at Food Share before. We have much smaller groups now to enforce social distancing. So how do we get that productivity that we would get from our volunteers usually in new and different ways? So just innovating and looking at ways to streamline our processes. And then on a more personal level, keeping our team motivated because we've been working hard and there's not really an end in sight. So how do we take breaks and celebrate our small wins?
No, I love that. And William, I'm going to ask you in just a moment about some things that you're doing for your customers, specifically on how you can get those processes and educations in the cloud and online for those of us that aren't as tech savvy as you. But before I move over to you on that, William, just to give you a moment to process that, Miranda, one question I do want to ask is, you talked about motivation. And again, I complimented you earlier on just your positivity and obviously the great work that you and your team are doing. I'd love to understand, and you don't have to get name names or anything, because obviously I don't want to put you in a awkward position, but just as a leader yourself, what are some ways and tactics that you've been using that have been helping to motivate your team? So take us through maybe a story in as much detail as you're comfortable sharing. Tell us about a time where you were finding, someone's morale or motivation might be dropping for a number of reasons outside of your control, and how you sort of turned it around and sort of spiked that motivation and brought that positivity.
Sure. I think being yourself and connecting with people, and admitting I seem positive, but I have my hard days too. I think that's important. So to get real honest with you, I have anxiety, and my staff have anxiety because of this, and admitting that and talking about it. Really just being honest and being human. Sounds simple, but connecting with people and hearing from them.
No, I love that. And honestly, it's the simple things that matter, right? Those are the details that make the difference between, success and failure in some cases in these challenging times. The one thing I'd offer up, just you mentioned anxiety, which I immediately connect to mental health, which I think is something that I've seen people who are seemingly the most, confident and even balanced people. And now in the amidst the pandemic, I'm seeing a lot of mental health challenges in my friends and my family and my colleagues. The one thing I want to offer up to everybody is, whether it's your thing or not, is, make sure to move, make sure to hydrate. As trivial as that sounds, consider downloading an app like Headspace or Calm. Many of them have 30-day trials where you can sort of get into, a meditation practice or something to just breathe and breathe through it. I think, as Miranda was saying, that the vulnerability of putting yourself out there, as clearly she did with her team, I think established an authentic connection. I think about leaders like Brene Brown and the sort of amazing work she talks about. Obviously, Brene's a shame researcher, and in many cases talks about the power of authentic and vulnerable connections. So on that note, William, I want to come back around to you on the technology side. Miranda was talking about processes and education. Obviously now a lot of us are having to adapt and shift the way we do business due to the new normal, as you say. Can you talk a little bit about some tactics that have worked for you and your customers for getting updated education and processes in the cloud?
So what we do is we definitely tell our clients, we let them know, we educate them about the type of tools that are out there and the tools that they should be using. We want to make sure that there's not any redundancy in place. And what we do is we create a phase zero. That's our process. We call it a phase zero process. So we'll sit down with the client and we'll walk through their company, and they'll go over everything that's going on, and we'll see how they're actually doing their day-to-day. And we'll note down any redundancy, any tools that they're not getting the best use out of. If there are other tools out there, we definitely recommend those tools for them. And we don't necessarily get commission off of that. This is what's going to help our client. That's great, because then they're going to want to work with us again. If there isn't a tool out there for them, then we just build it for them. But that's how we do it. We set up a lot of material, and we try to put that information on our website as well. And we've been creating new videos as well to kind of educate anyone who's interested in trying to streamline their business process, especially now. I know things are kind of harder. The things that you would normally do in the workplace, you can't really do there anymore. So that's what we have a phase zero for, to help them understand what they can and can't do anymore.
I love that idea of a phase zero. I mean, sort of a little bit of a tech nerd joke, starting with the zero index on arrays, right? So I see you there. So I love that idea of phase zero, like where to start, where to begin. I'm hoping that the CBIA AV team, who's been great today, thank you again for that, can include William's a link to his website, Triple Helix, I think, where some of that educational content is out there. But William, what is that URL, just to read it out so we can capture that?
Yeah, on our website, 3xcorp.com. That's 3xcorp.com. We have all our material right there on the front page there. And you can also check out our blog as well. And we like to inform the community on things that can help them out.
Awesome. No, I love that. So another question come in here. So we will drop that link in the chat for folks to click on. question for Melissa here is, Melissa, can you talk a little bit more about what businesses that are still closed or on limited operations due to COVID, specifically restaurants, event spaces, et cetera? What can we be doing in order to help keep these businesses going and prepare them for, what will hopefully ultimately be a full reopening when that time is safe to do so?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, kind of the theme of this entire conference is, all of the business leaders and leaders of organizations, young leaders, whoever you are, look for those opportunities to support our local businesses. However, we as business owners can work with local businesses, I think is really, really important. Not looking outside of the state, looking within Connecticut and looking to see how, not just with restaurants and businesses in hospitality, how can we support them, but, look to outsource any of your services to local businesses. And in terms of talking about some of those restaurants specifically, again, if we're a larger business and all of our employees are working remotely, choose a favorite local restaurant that you absolutely love, that your employees are familiar with, and work with them to create a little care package or a little happy hour box that you can send out to all of your employees that will benefit everyone. It will benefit your employees in terms of the culture and staying connected and giving you guys like a virtual happy hour you can enjoy together and bring everyone together on. And it will also generate revenue for that restaurant. So I think just getting creative and making sure that you collaborate as a community, different businesses, different organizations coming together to see how they can support each other. There's so many opportunities out there, and I could probably come up with a million ideas if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me how they can do that. There's so many creative ways.
I love that. And one thing I want to just build on what Melissa just said there, and I think would be really helpful. And obviously, again, definitely William was mentioning some resources for doing that. But I think when I think about local, how do we drive local commerce? How do we drive local community? I think it comes down to connection and content, right? So to Melissa's point, now more than ever is the time to support those local businesses. Now more than ever is the time to, not support the corporate giants and the chains, but rather the smaller businesses. Because right now, I think it's our opportunity, but also responsibility as CT residents to, support our local community. And I think that local commerce is going to, again, it might make your employees or your clients, happy. I know recently I heard a story where someone ordered some pastries from a local bakery and sent those pastries to some of their clients and used that to create a sales call. So that might be helpful for someone like Melissa, who's able to have, a virtual sales call, but sort of eating the same pastry, proverbially in the same virtual room. So again, what can you do just to get prescriptive? Because I do want to make sure that we're really being specific. We talk about strategies here, a lot of strategies, but just to get tactical, which I think now tactical, practical is important. Like Melissa said, find those local businesses, order from those local businesses, contact them. Many of them are now launching online order forms, right? So, if cash is a challenge, some of us, can use our credit cards, our business credit cards to sort of purchase some of those things. That's going to help those local business owners stay in business, stay open, stay serving us. But you at the same time can stay safe by not necessarily having to worry about, potentially being in those inside spaces. I know some folks are concerned with the weather dropping. So support those local businesses. If you have relationships with them, if you're lucky enough to have a blog or social media like William was talking about, publish content on your blog. Tag these folks on Instagram. I know of a friend recently who was working with a very, very small catering company. That's in some cases, on par with a local chain restaurant, right? So being able to work with those caterers, putting together special types of situations for your employees, for your loved ones, consider supporting those folks versus some of the large corporations that might have a lot more money sitting in the bank to stay open for the long haul. On that note, just to sort of kind of keep us flowing and moving here, one of the things that I want to sort of dive into next that I just think is really a big question that I've been seeing is just how to manage the big picture and the small picture. Specifically, the question I see coming up a lot is, how do we think about 3, 6, 12 months from now, which, most businesses are used to doing, when some businesses are trying to think about how they're going to keep their doors open just this week and just next week as an example. So, one of the things that I want to sort of ask the group here, and please feel free to chime in, whoever feels, most excited or passionate by this question, but what's a good example that you've seen recently that's really, really helped spark the positivity of someone who might be sort of thinking about giving up as a small business owner or thinking about giving up as an employee who's working those extra hours? Can you maybe share a story of resilience with the group here that might inspire them to model that in the work that they're doing?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, just within my own organization, I think that, I think a lot of businesses at times, they will leave the planning and the forecasting to more of the executive leaders within the company. I think opening it up to the entire team or more of the team at a time like this can generate a lot of ideas, a lot of innovative new approaches, fresh perspectives that we kind of need right now because we don't know what the future is going to look like. We kind of have to plan for every different scenario. And I think that it not only helps us as leaders to get that fresh perspective and keep us motivated and excited, but also it incites, a different level of energy within the greater organization. So I think it's important right now not to be kind of hush hush and be planning behind closed doors, but really open it up to your full team.
I love that. And I think what I'm hearing, just sort of to kind of play that back for the audience here, that was some great stuff from Melissa, is this idea of now more than ever, ideas and solutions for both the sustainability and growth of your business should and can come from everywhere, right? So really fostering a culture of inclusion in every sense of the word. I mean, obviously we're hearing inclusion in that word meaning a very different thing this year. I think in positive progress in a lot of ways. I think brought about by some of these forced changes that we're seeing. But to Melissa's point, asking everybody in the company, from the interns all the way up to the C-suite, depending on the size company you're at, asking for ideas, asking for the challenges that they're facing and how some suggestions or ideas that they might have to contribute to that. I saw a specific question coming in here for Miranda. I just want to make sure to touch on here. So Miranda, are you concerned about funding going forward? Perhaps people have less money to donate because they're hurting financially. The question specifically here is, how can nonprofits support themselves during this challenging time? And do you anticipate more need going into the winter?
It's a great question. We don't know what to expect, like many businesses, in the coming months. I would anticipate increased need, especially if there's another surge of the virus. And, winter months, fuel expenses go up, heat goes up. And if people are on that borderline, or if they're low-wage workers where they're having to choose between different basic needs, need will continue to rise. And our operations are going to have to keep up with that. FoodShare's purchasing more food than we've ever purchased before. I wish I had a number to quote for you, but usually about 5% of the food we distribute is purchased. Most of it is donated by the food industry. We've had to increase our purchasing so much. On the funding perspective, we've had such generous support, but we don't know how long that will sustain. So we're definitely planning multiple scenarios for our budgeting and forecasting to adjust as we can. Our Rensselaer field operations alone cost about $50,000 a week to sustain, to meet that need. So it's continue to look at the trends, reach out to our supporters, and plan for different scenarios.
Can I add to that, Pete, too?
Please.
We work with a few nonprofit organizations as well as clients, and we've had to get much more creative in terms of fundraising lately. You know, a lot of the donor support that they usually count on is not there. And so we've had to come up with ways to add value to the offering in order to get donation support back. A couple ways that we helped a couple local organizations, Fidelka Seeing Guide Dogs out in Bloomfield. We created a whole campaign around, I mean, this is quite simple, but not something they had normally done, branded masks, so that, you know, we know that everyone is going and needing to purchase masks anyways. This gives them the value back as the donor. It gives them the value of the mask, but they're still paying and providing a donation back. So it's kind of a win-win for the donor. And then Bushnell Park Foundation, again, we partnered with them on the Picnic in the Park series. They weren't able to have their normal annual fundraising events that they were used to. And so we were able to raise quite a bit of money with them through this event, through that collaboration, and providing, again, something back to the community, a public event for the community that they had to purchase. And of course, the proceeds then going to Bushnell Park Foundation. So I think trying to figure out ways, nonprofit organizations trying to find ways to add more value in order to receive those donations is going to be critical too, whether it's an experience or a good or anything.
I love that. Thanks so much for that ad, Melissa. So one thing I want to do, just in case I forget, is I want to say thank you to William, Miranda, and Melissa for just your time today. We know that we're pulling you away from many great and instrumental work. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you're doing here for Connecticut and the Connecticut communities and lives of people that you're supporting in all the different industries. I know we have about 3 minutes left, so I just want to make sure if there's anybody in the audience that has any questions for William, Miranda, or Melissa, please fire those questions up now because we are winding down in just about another minute or two. So, you know, one thing I did see from here, Picnic in the Park was a genius idea and execution. So that came from someone here in the audience. So thank you for that kudos. I'm sure the hard work pays off clearly here for the team involved in that. So thank you again for everybody involved. So thank you again for everybody. I know we're just about at time. So the last thing I want to do is take us down a rabbit hole or a tangent because I'm known for that time, Brett. But with that, I think just to sort of wrap it up a bit with some themes that we heard. So first and foremost, you know, find that phase zero, as William was saying. So like start where you stand, you know, where are you at right now? You know, take a deep breath, understand, you know, what are the resources that you have in front of you? What are your sort of top 1 to 3 things that you're challenged with from a business perspective? Obviously, you know, like they say on the airplanes, you know, you got to grab the oxygen mask for yourself first before you can do it for others. So take care of yourselves so that you can take care of your families and your employees and your communities. Find that silver lining, right? So as Miranda was saying, you know, it's being able to go in there with that optimist mindset, with that progress and growth mindset. You know, if we go into situations negatively, that behavior is going to spread like the virus has been spreading and we've seen this year. So find that silver lining. Again, we're better together when we collaborate, when we come together. We can see the importance of things like Picnic in the Park. We see the importance of supporting local businesses. So continuing to, you know, spend with them where you can, contribute where you can. No amount or act of kindness is too small, as Miranda was saying, during these challenging times. And then as William sort of covered throughout today, just the importance of technology. You know, now more than ever is the time. If you don't have as much work, if your teams are not as busy because you're sort of fighting to get more sales, now's the time to sort of get your process ready. Because as William said, this remote economy that we're faced with is not going to be shaping. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone at CBIA for having us here and really giving me such great panelists for me to sort of moderate today. And I'll have them switch over to the next panel now.
Let's get straight into the panel discussion. We have a great group here this morning representing a good segment of the business community. We've posted links to the survey in the chat box, so if you want to follow along and see where we are. But if you check the survey results, you can find them over there. So let's start with Ethan Briscoe from Marcum. Ethan, can you give us some of your initial insights into the survey and what are the main themes or themes you're seeing from the results?
Sure. So, I think one of the things that we were pleasantly surprised to see is that probably a larger number of surveyors this year than in years past. I would say, a lot of that is driven by, people that are striving for information, right? So by participating in the survey, of course, they're going to get feedback from a lot of their peers. And so, that's one of the things that certainly we're seeing. We're also, another stat that I think jumped out is that while there was a big downturn initially, right in the March, April time period, we've seen a quick rebound. Pleasantly surprised by that, and I think as we talk about from the rest of the panelists, we'll see that certain industries are starting to recover, over time, and we'll learn more about that as we talk to other panelists.
Great, thanks, Ethan. Richard Brown, your initial thoughts to the survey results. Any surprises?
I think overall, some of the themes are consistent year over year, looking at what prior surveys have resulted in. But I think seeing how the state or the participants are being resilient, trying to be creative and figure out ways to continue to drive their business in a challenging environment, that was a good thing. And I was, pleasantly surprised, although there's some challenges, seeing that a number of people have figured out a way to start to turn the corner.
It looks like Michael is back. Michael, do you want to take over?
Yes, I am back. I apologize for that. Our remote workforce and technology failed me, I guess, for a little bit, but we're backing up and running here.
Great. Well, we talked quickly with Richard and Ethan just about their initial reaction to the survey. So we'll hand it back to you.
Yeah. So, I was thanking CBIA, for their efforts in continuing to push this survey along. I appreciate the diligence in going through. Thanks, Chris, and your team for the hard work on this project. And also, I'd be remiss if not acknowledging the recent retirement of Joe, who obviously has done worked tirelessly over the years to help Connecticut businesses. As kind of my overview to kind of set the stage for the panelists, one of my biggest takeaways in the survey was that only 47% of the respondents said they expect to be profitable at the end of 2020. That's expected, but that's down 30% from where we were last year, where that same question was at 77%. While 28% are forecasting losses in 2020, which is up 17%. The rest of the respondents are expected to break even. And again, just 12% of the businesses surveyed forecast economic growth in Connecticut over the next 12 months. So I think hopefully this panel can, put together a roadmap and a plan to help all constituents, all stakeholders in the state of Connecticut to help as CBIA said, help Connecticut rebuild and rebuild fast. And as the previous panel said, not only rebuild, but rebuild better. Some highlights that we have seen, some good things. I think Josh Geballe mentioned earlier today that, Connecticut, other businesses outside our state are giving Connecticut a second look. People are moving here in droves based on what we're seeing with the real estate market in the last few months here. And people and businesses and you all are still being innovative. You're adding new products, you're doing research and development. 64% plan on bringing new products and producing those new products here in the state of Connecticut. Last year, that number was only 49% or 48%, excuse me. So we're seeing an uptick in what people are planning on doing and hopefully seeing more business and less regulations in the state of Connecticut. I, for one, look forward to hearing what the panelists have to say, and I'm glad Rich and Ethan were able to talk briefly. I'll let Jill kind of get into. Jill, tell us a little bit about your business, what you do, and how you operate. So take it away, Jill.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Jill Mayer, a CEO of Bead Industries, and Bead is a fifth generation family business, manufacturing business. We're headquartered in Milford. We have another location in Cheshire where we produce plumbing fixture trim, commercial plumbing fixture trim. And at our Milford facility, we manufacture electronic contact pins for automotive, telecom, medical, different markets. We're about 50 employees between the two locations, 20 million in revenue. So we're fairly small. And, you know, Bead is part of Manufacturer CT, which is formerly NHMA, one of the state's manufacturing associations. And, you know, I'm looking forward to the conversation today. And I was enjoying the jazz music earlier. And I miss live music, that's for sure.
Thanks, Jill. And Frank, you want to jump in and tell us a little about yourself and the business?
Sure. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Marcum and CBIA for inviting me to participate in this panel. My name is Frank Ferrucci. I'm a vice president of F&F Mechanical. We are a second generation family-owned and operated mechanical contracting firm, and our organization has two legs. Our construction group fabricates and installs commercial HVAC, plumbing, sheet metal, and process piping for the commercial and industrial markets in Connecticut. And our service group provides performance, preventive maintenance, equipment repairs, emergency repairs to our clients, also here in the state of Connecticut, and to a lesser extent, Westchester County. Our main fabrication facility and corporate offices are in North Haven, with a branch office and fabrication facility in Stamford, Connecticut. We currently have about 115 employees, down a bit from pre-COVID, but we're hoping to bounce back.
Thanks, Frank. You know, let's jump right into the survey. You know, thanks everyone for the introduction. You know, Rich and Ethan, I hope you had a good introduction while I was in hiatus there.
They didn't.
Yeah, perfect.
Michael, they did not get a chance to introduce themselves.
Oh, they didn't. All right.
No.
So, Rich, go ahead.
Sure. So thank you so much, Michael, CBIA, Marcum, for allowing me to sit on the panel with such a distinguished panel. My company, 58 Holdings, we are a real estate investment company. We tend to purchase distressed properties, small apartment buildings, single family homes, 2 and 3 family homes. We renovate those homes and give them new life. So right now, based on what's happening in the market, we are glad to be where we are. We're a fairly new business. We're about 2.5 years old, and we're excited about what's going on, at least real estate wise, right now, because there's a lot of excitement and opportunity.
Thank you. Excellent. Pleasure to have you. And Ethan, you know, I could have passed you up. You're one of my partners here at Marcum, but I'll let you speak anyways. Go ahead, Ethan.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. So, you know, obviously, you know, part of Marcum and full service national, you know, accounting professional services firm, but specifically within that, I lead up the financial accounting and advisory services group. So effectively providing services and augmenting finance and accounting functions for various companies through providing technical accounting, complex accounting, helping them through transactions. And we also, you know, provide bookkeeping services as well as accounting operations and IPO readiness, audit readiness, those types of services to our clients, as well as internal audit advisory services. So effectively anything that where we can expand the skill set and breadth of a finance function, you know, we typically can, you know, address their needs. So thanks, Michael, for the introduction.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and welcome. And thanks for joining us today. Greatly appreciate it. Rich, let's kick it off with you because I almost passed you up on the introduction, so I apologize with that.
No problem.
You know, as I mentioned earlier, the expected profitability among respondents dropped dramatically, dropped 30% of who thought they were going to be profitable by the end of 2020. You know, what's your company doing right now? Are they growing? Are they holding steady? Are they contracting? and what do you see as the main drivers in that?
Well, being in the real estate field, we are growing and growing rapidly. Based on where we are last year, we're probably going to double our profits easily. But part of that is also because we're a new company. The other thing that I will tell you, though, is that people are moving to the state in droves. Primarily, we operate in Hartford County. The last 2 properties we sold, both were sold to people from out of state. One property went for 20% over the asking price, and that was in Bloomfield. The other property went for about 15% over the asking price, and that was in West Hartford. And both of those properties, we priced pretty aggressively, knowing that there's limited inventory for people. And so we priced pretty aggressively, and we still had a number of offers and a number of showings in a really, really short time. So that's been driving our profitability this year. We also do what we call rental property. So we have buy and holds. And what we found there is prices are strong in that market as well. People are looking for apartments. They're looking for stuff with more space. One of the things I tell people is it seems to me that if you've got a high-rise apartment building, people, after working with their spouse or they're having their animals really close to them and not being able to get out when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden being able to have some space, some elbow space, or not having their significant other sharing, doing Zoom calls on the other side of the dining room table while they're trying to do theirs, has led to people saying, you know what, we need to spread out a little bit. I want a backyard. I want to be able to get outside. I want you to be able to take your calls on the other side of the house and not have to hear you. So those things have resulted in a very hot real estate market. That combined with, of course, the fact that there's low interest rates. And although the job scenario has been really difficult for a lot of white collar jobs because they're able to work from home, those buyers are feeling fairly secure, and as such, don't have a problem going out and looking for properties.
Great. Jill, Frank, or Ethan? Jill, we'll ask you same question. What's your company doing right now? Are you growing, holding steady, contracting?
I mean, we're holding steady. We certainly had growth plans. For hiring, we just sort of held off on the hiring. So we're sort of doing that and then just working towards growth initiatives that maybe are less capital intensive. Just trying to hang on, but plow forward just a little bit slower than we wanted to.
That's probably common across the state here. Frank, you're in an industry in construction that really wasn't shut down like other industries were in the state of Connecticut. You were considered essential through the entire time. And interesting in what your company's seeing as far as growth, holding steady or contracting.
Sure. You're right. So as Josh had indicated, the governor through executive order deemed construction to be essential. Although we were deemed to be essential, as you can imagine, certain organizations and facilities essentially stopped all work. As a matter of fact, all hospital work, all contracts that we have in our hospitals pre-COVID are still on hold. So that work, although it was deemed essential by the governor, Department of Public Health has effectively put the pause button on that type of work. We are starting to see a slight rebound on the commercial contracting side, but I think it's going to be a pretty long haul in terms of it bouncing back to pre-COVID levels. One of the statistics that we follow pretty closely is the Architectural Billing Index that's put out by the AIA. And when the index is below 50, it's an indication that the architects are designing less, billing less, hence designing less. And above 50 is that there's an increase in design fees. Since March, it's been below 50. Just yesterday, they released their August results, which was at 40. So from the time architects put pen to paper until a project is shovel ready, it's anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. So we've been in this now a good 6+ months. So I think it's going to be a pretty long haul for construction before it really starts to feel like pre-COVID levels. Two bright sides, I would say, is to pick up on what Rich said, is that the residential market, I think there's a significant upswing in that, especially in Connecticut. And also our service group is seeing an uptick as a result of deferred maintenance and folks making repairs and replacements rather than wholesale renovations. So it's going to be spotty here for at least the next 6 to 12 months for the construction industry.
Yeah, and I think that, the survey did say, you did see construction was probably the best in job recovery from pre-COVID to, when the pandemic really hit, March, April timeframe. I think you recovered 70% of your jobs back, and manufacturing in Jill's industry only recovering 32%. Anyone else, I'm interested in others' outlooks, Jill, Rich, or Ethan, what's your outlook in your specific industry over the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I'll step in first. I mean, I will tell you that one of the things that I'm concerned about while, make hay while the sun is shining. Certainly, I'm thrilled with what's happening in the real estate market, but I am a little concerned about it being overheated. Certainly, we're not sure what's going to happen in December when we start to get people are talking about maybe COVID will increase. You're talking about you won't be able to discern between the flu, COVID, a regular cold, what that impact will have on folks and how people feel. And once things start to sort out, we're not sure what next year looks like. And so as a consequence, on the residential side of real estate, long term, I'm a little worried. I think prices are a little frothy right now. I don't believe they're sustainable. We've gotten guidance from the feds that interest rates will stay low for, they're talking about through 2023, which I think will be an asset, but I'm cautious is where I'm looking at it from that perspective. And, with jobs, I've heard companies, because as you showed with the survey, not being as profitable or concerned about profitability, I'm concerned that we may start to see some shift in the economic, in the labor market as a result, as people try to manage their costs.
I'll chime in. I've got my thoughts together now. I think it really depends with manufacturing what markets you're in. Of course, for aerospace and people aren't flying. Personal hygiene manufacturing, people are working from home, so maybe they're not shaving their legs or doing whatever, putting on a ton of makeup. But for bead, we're diverse enough. We're in a number of different markets where maybe our automotive is down, but our medical and our specialty lighting is up. So I think it really comes down to how diversified your customer base is. And if it's not diversified now, I think manufacturers are looking at diversifying however they can at this point.
Yeah, great insight. And Ethan, on that same question, I know you, not necessarily in one industry, you service a kind of a broad range of industries. Do you see any industries taking longer to recover than others, or would you have some insight onto that?
Sure. I was going to say, fortunately for professional services, we kind of are aligned to multiple industries, and so listening to Joe, Rich, and Frank, how they're not only individual industries are dealing with this downturn, but also segments within those industries, right? One segment could be up, then another could be down. I mean, it's the same, I think, way across professional services where, we fortunately or the pandemic came at a time where a lot of our compliance work, as you know, Michael, was kind of locked in for the year. Audits had to be done. Tax returns, while pushed off a few months, still had to be done by July 15th, if not extended. So we are naturally hedged in that regard, where we not only saw some or stayed certainly consistent. We saw a lot of growth in certain segments. So for instance, the advisory segments, a lot of projects had already been planned. And so companies fortunately wanted to move forward with those transactions, IPOs. So in our particular FAS advisory segment, we saw business go up probably about 20% this year. And part of that was workforce reductions, where initially a workforce reduction happened, but then within a month or two, they were fortunately able to start to recover, right, as they got back into business and got their sea legs a little bit, and therefore they couldn't get maybe the workforce back initially, so they were able to pull us in from a remote basis. So
excellent. So Jill, I'll kick this one off to you, and others join in. You know, a lot have happened. You know, government did act quick, both in the state of Connecticut and federally with some stimulus. The CARES Act was passed. Other local stimulus, I think Josh talked about, kind of unfortunately sold out in the first 24 to 48 hours, if you will, here in Connecticut. You know, it seemed to ease some of the burden. You know, first question I have, you know, did you apply for PPP loan or the Paycheck Protection Program? And then second kind of part of that question, you know, did it help during the pandemic? And, you know, what challenges do you face as the funds become exhausted? Because as we know, there was originally an 8-week period. Now it's extended to 24. So those you know, timeframes, I think, from when we were issued the PPP, most of them are coming to an end here.
Right. Well, absolutely, we did apply, and we received funding in the first round, thanks to our, you know, a solid relationship with our bank, People's Bank. It was critical for us. So we're a 106-year-old company, been through recessions, depressions, World War I and II. It would have been really unfortunate to have gone through all of that just to crumble during the pandemic. Not on my watch. So we definitely did, and we received the funding. So because of the funding, we didn't have to have layoffs. I was looking at the survey, which mentions that during the 2008 recession, there were 120,000 jobs lost. Compared to this year, and that was over 2 years. Compared to this year, we lost more than double that in 2 months. So, right. So we, you know, and back in 2008, BEAD had to lay off a third of its workforce. So we didn't have to do that this time, and we're so grateful because we really don't want to do that. We have skilled, dedicated people with wonderful work ethic. You know, we're a family. So yeah. So with the PP funds, we were able to keep everybody on. You know, I mentioned earlier in terms of growth, we weren't, you know, aggressively hiring, but we didn't lay anyone off. And then, you know, we also had additional funds for the extra expenses of PPE and cleaning and disinfecting daily. That was something that, of course, is an added expense. We've exhausted the funds by now, but sales levels are normalizing. So I don't think the situation's as dire. And, you know, we were able to, rather than be stressed out, focus on whittling down our costs and, you know, looking into diversifying and investing in equipment. So I think it was money well spent. I think, you know, yeah, it was money well spent.
As a follow-up to that, Jill, and I'll ask the others' input as well. You know, there's been a lot of talk on kind of the second round, if you will. It's kind of being hung up. Unfortunately, we're not sure where it will go, if it goes anywhere or if it's delayed, you know, till after the election, possibly. Do you think there would be a need from your point of view for another round of PPP or some type of similar program that may not be even as beneficial as PPP, but something that can help kind of bridge that gap of uncertainty? Because, you know, based on the survey that I've seen and everyone else that I talked to, there's definitely still uncertainty out there on what's going to happen. How things are going to shake out once, you know, as we move forward here.
I mean, I have mixed feelings because, you know, we were struggling a little bit before the pandemic, manufacturers in the state. I mean, so, you know, I'm just acutely aware that our federal deficit is at stake when we do these rounds of funding with the PPP. It was very expensive. I think if there was a second round, I don't know that BEAD would need it, but I certainly think that the food and food service and hospitality industry, I don't know that they got as much as they should have. But in terms of programs, the shared work program, I just heard that was expanded. That's another program that would be helpful to us if our sales don't pick up, if they take longer to pick up than we maybe have forecasted. So, and I'm not sure if people are aware of the shared work program. It's you can prevent layoffs by your employees can go partially to part-time and then also receive unemployment for the rest. So it's a helpful program if you need it.
Great. No, that's good. Good insight. Rich, Ethan, Frank,
We
PPP loan.
we participated in the PPP program, and we did receive funds in the first go round. It was definitely beneficial, although we did have to lay off. It could have been far more severe in the depth and breadth of the layoffs had it not been for the PPP funds. We are, as of today, I'd be 50-50 should we need additional funds. The market seems to have stabilized, but as I mentioned before, it's not growing. And I believe that there is a need for additional stimulus. The hospitality, aerospace industries, they're definitely hurting. But one of our major clientele are hospitals and healthcare facilities, and they've been certainly battered being on the front line of the COVID fight. So they are in dire need of financial assistance. And that will certainly help not only the hospitals and those that are employed by the hospitals, but those service providers that rely on the hospitals for their work as well.
Rich?
Our firm did not need to participate in that, but I support everything that these guys have just said in terms of, I do think we're probably going to need a second round. And I think for those industries who are very slow to recover, those are where those funds should be focused to help those companies weather the storm, as it were.
And Ethan, I'd ask you from a perspective of, you saw kind of
the other side, right?
Yeah, the large different companies and different industries. Are the results of 86% of the surveyors, is that pretty accurate of what you saw of your clients getting the PPP loan and utilizing it?
No, absolutely. I mean, we obviously being on the other side, we're helping our clients kind of navigate through the rules. Ones, the rules obviously were pushed out fast, which was good, right? There was a quick response by the government, but then there were some false starts, and so helping them navigate what the rules, who would qualify, who wouldn't qualify, and then just working with companies with the paperwork and various documentation that they have to provide, and then in order to kind of stay compliant, especially where the programs that are being forgiven. So we saw it across all industries, certainly several hundred clients, just in Connecticut alone, took advantage obviously of this, but kind of across many just different, I would say, demographics, right, sizes of companies and industries. And so in terms of a second round, I think we could definitely see that need, especially if there's a double dip, but I think what companies are doing now is looking at more of their forecasting and trying to put together some more robust forecasting to even determine whether they would need that second round if it was made available.
Yeah, it sounds like people that did take advantage of it, it actually was utilized appropriately, and it served its purpose. And it sounds like the next stage is, we all feel, I think I heard most of us say, it should be targeted to those who are really going to need it. So that's good. Ethan, I'll keep it with you. Through the pandemic, I think we've learned some new things, social distance being another one. Wear your mask. I saw the license plate in Josh's office was one. The other one that's been pretty heavily used during the pandemic is remote workforce. We probably heard about it a little bit in the past, but never or nothing like we've seen now. Were you able, your staff able to work remotely? Did it affect business productivity? What did you see?
Sure. I mean, fortunately, we're in an industry that kind of has been set up for remote workforce for a while. A lot of the projects we do remotely, but I mean, I think so that we were able to on day 2 be able to switch over and really not skip a beat. But as you can see from the survey, there was about 50% of companies or respondents certainly that weren't able to, didn't have the capabilities to work remotely. And so, we saw that as well in our business. I mean, as we align, kind of we're providing a service to clients in various industries and needs. So, we align to them. So for the ones that actually went to a work from remote or work from home status, we did the same thing. For those that were essential or couldn't work remotely or needed to kind of be in their offices or their facilities, and as long as we followed the right protocols and they had protocols established and it was safe to work there, we would work alongside them. So we kind of saw both sides of Michael, but fortunately, we're in a service line that we've invested a lot in technology over the years, not only anticipating, something like this. I think it'd be hard to predict that, but certainly anticipating that we're gravitating to a more work from home and a flexible arrangement environment, which we like to offer, a lot of our professionals.
How about others? Remote workforce?
Well, construction, double-edged sword, our office staff, I think we did a fair job. We were able to get most of our employees to work remotely. We cobbled together a number of various programs, Slack, we utilized quite extensively, email, our VPN to tie back to our network. Our accounting group, unfortunately, had to work here at our offices because our servers were located here and it didn't work well with the VPN. As far as our field labor force, obviously they can't work remotely. They had to work at the various sites. But since then, we stepped back and we did a lessons learned, and pre-COVID, we embarked on a implementation of a new ERP for our accounting and operations work, and we've accelerated that. And just last week, we signed on with Microsoft 365 for their full suite of Microsoft Teams and being able to work off the cloud rather than relying on our servers. So I think COVID, folks have been, the prior panel spoke about silver linings. I think this forces you to think, how can we make our workforce as efficient as possible? Should we be quarantined again, or just simply being flexible for our workforce? We have a number of employees with young children. They're at school from home a number of the days. They would have to work with them. So it's allowing us to be much more flexible with our workforce than we had in the past. So the silver lining is that we'll be ready for whatever other pandemic or Mother Nature throws at us in the future, where we would be able to work remotely a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah, I second what Frank said there with the flexibility. Our office, obviously our manufacturing factory workers needed to stay, and we needed to have some supervision as well. But the office staff all went remote, and we didn't have a lot of remote work prior to that. And luckily we had put our manufacturing ERP system into the cloud month before this all happened. So we were able to work remotely pretty seamlessly. So either people were close or they had to do it after the fact, but that flexibility that you need for, parents and the different things. I mean, it was kind of bound to happen. We all should have been flexible anyway. So I feel grateful that we were somewhat forced to be flexible, and then we saw how it actually worked quite well. And so now we're continuing to be flexible with the different school districts having the different needs.
Yeah.
And I would add to that the optimistic side of me says that going forward, as we try to recruit more talent, now we know we can be flexible. We can position our work days as such to meet the needs of the talent and what their expectations are. I think, before the pandemic, many of us, me included, I'll start with me, had a very fixed notion of what work looked like and what you expected people to do. And as a consequence, sometimes we were biased against people who wanted to work from home or wanted some flexibility and whatnot. And now we see that, that may be the norm going forward. I think that the other thing that I look at for a state or for our state is this is a great time to actually market some of our assets and talk about the things that we have. We have some great public and private schools in Connecticut and some great communities. We have smaller cities. And as a consequence, I think this is a great time for us to step up and say, look at what we have, come to Connecticut and participate in some of these things that we have in terms of our lifestyle, our highly educated workforce and whatnot. We should really be aggressive right now at touting those assets.
Excellent. Thanks, Rich. Before COVID hit, I think, last year's survey and kind of as we continued, through the first couple months of 2020, Connecticut had some issues or concerns as we move forward, business costs from regulations being one of them. I think we hit on availability of skilled labor. I know that's been a problem and has continued to be a problem, as well as cost of living. Jill, prior to the pandemic, as was mentioned, there was basically a war for talent in the state of Connecticut, and unemployment rate was lowest in nearly 2 decades. And it was particularly difficult finding highly skilled manufacturing talent. How has that changed since the pandemic? And what workforce challenges do you predict over the next 12 months in hiring those people back to the workforce?
Yeah, so I mean, the pandemic hasn't changed much in terms of our workforce needs. If anything, I would say because of the increase in unemployment and some of the layoffs that were happening, there was probably a temporary widening of the talent pool, but people that were manufacturing companies that were hiring, their revenue had to be rebounding enough for them to begin hiring again. So maybe the talent pool widened a bit, but you had to be in the market. There's about 4,000 manufacturers in the state of Connecticut, and they employ 160,000 employees. So, and then you've got the baby boomers that are headed for retirement. So pandemic or not, there continues to be kind of an issue with finding skilled workers. I think the biggest question is where are we going to find them? And the short-term solution would be, outsourcing, automation, but the long-term solution is attracting new people into the industry and then investing in training them. And so Connecticut's doing a lot of things in terms of training. I'll list a couple, there's a ton. I'll list a few that I think are really helpful. One is the apprenticeship program through the Department of Labor. There's the state funded trainings like Skill Up and 180 Skills that are basically curriculums developed in tandem with the educators and the manufacturers to ensure that the curriculum meets the needs and aligns with what the manufacturers are looking for. And then of course, there's also just internal mentoring. You have an older toolmaker who's mentoring a younger apprentice. And that can be expensive if you have 2 people in the same role. Just a couple months ago, Governor Lamont launched the Workforce Development Unit that Kelly Valeries is leading. The survey talks a little bit more about that as well. The Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative, which was formed, a little less than 2 years ago, we were able to appoint a chief manufacturing officer, Colin Cooper. Never had someone in that role before. So those are all things that are happening because of the workforce challenges. There's a lot of irons in the fire. I predict, I would say, over the next 12 months, a greater sense of urgency around it. I mean, certainly there's urgency around workforce, but we're still not training at the speed in which we need to. So I think manufacturers have to temper the training with the technology, and they have to make sure they're doing it in tandem. And that's going to require upskilling and reskilling of our workforce.
Frank, you're in a business as well that, requires some skilled workforce. On that kind of the same topic, I mean, the responders to the survey said that only 20% will expect to increase their workforce next year. Do you think that's solely COVID-19, or do you think there's other reasons that were laid out in an earlier slide that might have something to do with it?
Well, I do, obviously, COVID-19 has certainly had an impact on the workforce. I'll touch upon just briefly what Jill said in terms of training and apprenticeship. We partner with a number of building trades, and they do a fantastic job with their apprenticeship programs and recruiting young individuals and giving them very solid training, which we appreciate. But then and that gives them the basic skills. Once they come on board with us, and if we identify someone that could be a future leader, a field leader, a foreman or general foreman or a superintendent, we then take that individual and expand the training program so that they have those skill sets that they could be future leaders. So there is a need. There's absolutely a need. Now, construction is still, pre-COVID was still recovering from the 2008 crisis. It's still not hit its peak numbers in employment pre-COVID. We were just getting out of it and just seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when COVID hit and brought a downturn. So I think, as I indicated before, I think for the next 6, possibly 12 months, it's going to be a little bit of belt tightening. But after that, I think there is some positive momentum in the state, with folks looking to move in. Not only residences, I'm hearing, and I know that Commissioner Lehman and the governor have been attempting to attract smaller companies moving into the Fairfield County area rather than wholesale large corporate relocation. So I think in the future, there's going to be some positive momentum there. And I also believe that for construction, again, as a result of COVID, the code consultants and the engineers are going to revisit our various building codes. So 12 to 24 months from now, you'll start seeing new codes that are out there for ventilation requirements. Offices are going to be designed differently to allow for more social distancing and spacing. So I think in the mid to far term, I think the construction industry could look to really benefit, ironically, from what we learned during the pandemic.
Great.
And Michael, I wanted to go back to two things that you touched on that question, because prior to COVID, right, there was some trends in Connecticut, both an aging demographic that Jill alluded to, and a lot of retirees, but then folks also moving out of Connecticut for various reasons. But the silver lining, if anything, is both Jill and Frank said, and Rich alluded to before, people are now looking to move into Connecticut, get a little more space, get a little more real estate, if you will, or just be that much further from a metro, urban setting. And, so that's bringing in talent, obviously. So if anything, there's been that silver lining where I think that workforce availability across all industries, younger, both a younger demographic, but then a broader skill set and a demographic will benefit the state.
So I begged and pleaded with CBIA to give me a couple extra minutes. So we got an extra 5 minutes here. So we're not done just yet. So thanks everyone for that, from my technical difficulties. So I'll take responsibility there. But with that, I'll jump into, there is a Q&A here, getting back to kind of remote workforce, if you will. And, I'll say we're seeing this as well. This is a very good question. It's unfortunate, people were able to work from home, or fortunate that people were able to work from home. Not all staff are thriving though. They need to in-person connections and contact. Are you seeing this, and how are you dealing with it? And, I'll throw it out to the group. Is anyone seeing that, some people just need to be in the office, or at least be collaborative with their coworkers? Is that what you're seeing? I know we're seeing that here at Marcum, that we want to see, the collaboration, and we think that provided better productivity. Interested in what everyone else saw.
So I'll jump in. I will just say, on a personal level, I'm an extrovert. I need people. And what's been really interesting about conducting Zoom calls and teleconferences and not being able to be in an office environment where you're interacting with folks, it feels foreign. And so it's been an adjustment period. And what I've actually done is I've taken the opportunity to have as many outdoor meetings as I can, find as many restaurants as I can that have outdoor seating. I've done walking meetings, things of that nature, where you can have a socially distant group dynamic, smaller groups, of course, and get some of that, the energy that you get from being in person. But certainly, I think we're going to be a changing environment, but man, it's been a challenge for me personally with that.
I agree with you, Richard, and those are good ideas, the walking meetings. I like that. But I do think too, not just with personality types, in terms of how well they do working remotely, but also specific job functions are best done, with some amount of on-site. But I think, just as we're at-will employers, if an employee is struggling with it and they are not able to come in, that's got to be addressed. But I think for the most part, if you're hiring right now, you're doing the Zoom interviews, you're already checking out their capabilities as a remote worker. And I also think the blend of how much remote and how much on-site is a factor. If it's completely remote, so you got to be solid. I don't know that I could do it either. Same with Richard. I like people.
And we, as soon as the governor allowed for offices to reopen, we obviously followed all the guidelines and we brought folks back. We did hear a number of our individuals who were working remotely that they just need that interaction, that human interaction. Part of it is psychological. My wife is a social worker and she does see that effect on folks that work remotely. But also just the nature of our business, that we have a fabrication shop for both piping and sheet metal, and issues come up all the time, questions come up all the time, and it's hard to do it remotely with a tablet. That person to person, face to face collaboration to problem solve is key. So as soon as we were able to, we brought back our staff, obviously in a safe manner.
Great. With that, time's running up here. We're coming on 11:25. We'll ask each of you, Jill, starting with you, on some closing remarks. I know there was a lot of, there was some other questions that we didn't get to, but overarching, get to some valid points and some things you'd like to discuss in your closing remarks. But what can we do together to move our state forward? What can we do as business leaders What can the state do to help our businesses here? As far as closing remarks to help us move forward and get through this, because it will be over. Hopefully, it might be 6 months, it might be a year, it might be 2 years, but eventually we'll get through it, and we're going to have to figure out ways to move forward. That's probably going to look different, based on the changes that we're incorporating now. But I'll open it up. Closing remarks.
Sure.
So,
Sorry, Richard.
No, you go right ahead. You go right ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, mine will be short and sweet. I was just going to say, we've got to keep it positive. We really do. I don't know if you guys have seen the cartoon where the cartoon characters, go through this long journey and then they collapse at the doorstep and they don't make it because they couldn't go that last little step. And I always thought, no, you're there, you're so close. So, we don't know how long it will take to rebound from the pandemic, but we do know that even if there is a second wave, which I don't personally believe there will be, but we've got to stay positive and we've got to focus on what we can be doing. And we've also got to celebrate how far we've come and how we got through it. I think, manufacturers have a lot of grit and a lot of resilience. And that has been a strength through this. This coming month, October, is manufacturing month. So for manufacturers, we're focused on, the positive perceptions of manufacturing, and again, attracting workers to the industry. So, I guess that's it for me. Stay positive and stick with it. And, we got this.
Good advice.
I would say that one of the things I'm hoping is like for Frank, Angel, and many other companies who are represented on the call, they've had to figure out, because of COVID, how to operate in a much more lean fashion. And one of the things that I'm hoping is for our state, it's forcing our governor and our legislators to look at our own budget and say, oh my goodness, we've got to make some cuts. We've got to do some things differently. And through that, I may be a cockeyed optimist in this, but through that, I'm hoping that down the road, we'll see some benefit of changes that they've had to make. And that will have a positive impact on the business climate. And then to reiterate what Jill said, I mean, Connecticut, to me, we represent grit, we represent hardiness, we represent tough, creative, innovative, and I want us as a collective to continue to do that. Some of the people on the call may know or remember my mentor, Oz Griebel. He was always a champion for Connecticut. And I remember in many of the conversations that we would have, he would say to me, we have everything we need here to be a successful state and to be one of the best states. So that's the message I would leave people with, is that we have everything we need to be one of the best states. So let's kick butt.
All right, way to go, Richard. Again, what the prior panel had said as far as looking at the bright side and Josh seeing the glass half full, we took the opportunity, and part of the survey indicated that folks rolled out new product lines. Well, we as a company looked back and we said, hey, what can we do? What service lines can we now offer? So we rolled out 2 new service lines. One was being able to offer automated temperature controls. We see a need that in the future, again, because of the pandemic, we have the installation, now we need the control aspect. So we're gonna offer that to some of our clients. So we're gonna dip our toe into that pool. And then we also recently received our certification for our R and S stamps, which allows us to fabricate and repair pressure vessels and pipe, such as boilers. So that's a service we'll be able to offer to our larger institutional industrial customers. So for businesses out there, look inward, see what other product lines or product offerings you can offer to your clients. But I also want to take this moment and pick up on a question that was asked to Josh. Although it was related to the DOT, I want to open that up to all of Connecticut's construction arms. The Department of Construction Services, I speak to them quite often, and they're frustrated in that their delivery methods on delivering construction is antiquated. Just as the software system in the state was antiquated, the delivery method is also antiquated. So I encourage the governor and his administration to look at that and see new ways that the state can offer the construction, different delivery methods that, again, with first and foremost being the best return and investment for the taxpayers. So not only am I a contractor in the state, I'm a taxpayer in the state. So I wanted the funds to be used as efficiently as possible. So those are my closing thoughts.
And Michael, just, really quick, staying with that, theme of staying positive and embracing change. I mean, I do think as things continue to recover, we just have to isolate the changes we did make and the things we implemented and listen to our people and say kind of what worked and how do we sustain that, right? If you're a manufacturer, for instance, you may have had to pick up different supply chain to meet needs and obviously develop new relationships with those or a different way to deliver to customers. We need to really embrace that change and make sure we could sustain it going forward. Because if we just flip back to, the way we used to do things, we're going to lose that innovation, as Richard said.
Yeah, good point. So, in a nutshell, I think, if we take, what we've learned through this and kind of move forward and grow with it, I think the mantra, what I've heard from all four of you is we're in this together. Let's work together. Let's collaborate and let's get through it. So that's good news. The other thing I learned is, Richard, I'm going to invite you to my son's pregame speech so you can give the speech. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for taking your time. Thank you very much, Jill, Frank, Richard, and Ethan joining the panel. Greatly appreciate it. I think, as CBI mentioned, there will be an electronic version, a full version of the printed survey that'll be going out soon. I'm sure you can reach out to CBIA to grab that. And again, thank you for the partnership. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let me just wrap up, Michael, by thanking you and Marcum for your sponsorship and partnership with this as well. It's a great survey. There's lots of good materials in there. I also want to thank our staff for rolling with some of the technical issues we had, but overall, fairly smooth and doing a great job that they always do with these CBIA events. Also want to thank Josh Cabal. Hopefully you all saw what an amazing individual he is and how committed he is to working with the business community. It's not very often we were able to get Josh out. He's so busy, but he just adds so much information and comes at it from a really reasonable, realistic point of view. And finally, just thank all of our panelists. It was great to hear from such a diverse group during this time, especially some of our younger leaders during that panel. One of the great gems in Connecticut that I think we often take for granted is the best practices sharing that our businesses do with each other. You don't see that often in other regions, and I think it makes us so much stronger when people can share their stories about how they're overcoming adversity or what they're doing to grow or how they're improving their operations. Like one of the discussions said, it's a great opportunity to take advantage of the slow time to work on your business and so that you could come out stronger and faster. And our affiliate concept has been preaching that and working with companies, whether it's finding new revenue streams or optimizing processes. So I encourage all of you to, whether slow or growing, do what you can to continue to work on the business as much as working in the business. And let me just close, with what we talked about in the opening. These are challenging times. As one of our Rebuild Connecticut videos says, in adversity lies opportunity. And our Connecticut businesses and workforces are the best in the world, no doubt about that. We've been through tough times before and we've overcome them. And we can rebuild Connecticut so that it's better and stronger than before. But it takes everyone's involvement. And whether that's signing or sharing with your employees our policy pledge, which is in the survey and on our website, reposting our social media links, writing an op-ed, meeting with your legislators, which we're happy to arrange, or sharing with your stories with us, as I mentioned in the beginning, about how your businesses are impacting your communities and the state overall. That would be fantastic. We would greatly appreciate that, and we'll come through this together. So I want to thank all of you for your time this morning and for having a couple cups of coffee with us, and all the support you've given me, CBIA, our affiliates, Concept and Ready CT. We look forward to working with you in the future and continuing to grow our state. Stay well, everyone.